Chapter 322. Sorry for the long wait. It's been a long journey, so we only rested for 5 minutes after we arrived. I'm sure Captain Simon will understand, right? Silen's voice entered his ears. Right my ass. Simon looked like he was constipated. It wasn't just because the enemy had stayed right next to their starship for 5 minutes without being noticed, or because Silen's words made Simon want to flip the table. It was because the voice had come from their starship's communicator. Most importantly, none of the technicians had connected to the communicator until Simon had given the order. So, how did this voice come from his communicator? There was only one possibility: the enemy could control their communicator. Other than the communication system, Simon didn't know how many other devices the other party could control on his starship, but what happened just now had made him extremely vigilant. The more he thought about it, the more powerless he felt. Was he trying to take them down a notch? Simon felt as if he were a monkey in a circus, and he thought he was doing a good job. He was a member of the A Squadron after all, so he quickly adjusted himself. At the very least, he was back to normal on the surface. The technicians around him were still staring at him in disbelief. Trash. Simon cursed inwardly. Ahem. It's nice to meet you, everyone of the 11th Squad, Simon said after regaining his composure. Simon's words snapped everyone out of their daze, and they scrambled to connect the two starships. Simon had regained his composure, but when he saw the leader of the squad walking toward him, he lost his composure again. When Silen contacted Simon at the base, he was still a brawny, honest-looking young man with brown hair. Now, however, he was using his original appearance. Allow me to formally introduce myself. I am the current commander of the 11th B Squadron, Silen. This is my original appearance, Silen said to Simon, who looked like he was about to collapse. When Silen contacted Diaz and the others, he used the appearance he had when he was in the League of Stars. But after they arrived and set sail, he reverted to the appearance everyone in the Mist Bodhisattva Empire was familiar with. This was his true appearance, and it was the only way his body could be in peak condition. The full activation of the AI chip could allow Silen to exist in various forms, turning him into a different person. However, Silen still preferred his original appearance, which was the most natural. His body's energy consumption was the lowest, and his condition was maintained at its peak. I've been looking forward to meeting you for a long time. Simon clenched his teeth. Of all the things he could do, he chose to transform. Was this another show of strength? He had black hair, black eyes, and a tanned complexion. He was a healthy and sunny person, just like a young man who had just stepped out of his house and stepped into the outside world. But when he thought about Silen, he couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. He was obviously a kid who was much younger than him, but she couldn't see through him. She couldn't see through him, and she couldn't tell what he was thinking from the expression on his face. The original members of the 6th Division were looking at him strangely. They were wondering why Silen hadn't shown up yet, but now he was wearing a completely different face. Then, he looked at the people behind Silen. Asho was the only one who had stayed behind to take care of the children, and everyone else had come out with him. Simon scanned the group and noticed that half of them were people he knew, but the ones he didn't look like they were ordinary people. In the end, Simon's gaze landed on Shusag. The middle-aged man was flirting with a female technician next to him like a ruffian. He looked old and frivolous, but Simon's instincts told him that he was probably the strongest among the group of people he didn't know. In fact, he might even be on par with some of the seniors in the A-team. How could someone like him be willing to serve a young man like Silen as a foot soldier? Due to the consecutive setbacks, Simon didn't reveal his original plan. What he wanted most right now was for Silen's group to leave his territory as soon as possible. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to rest easy. Especially the way that frivolous middle-aged man looked at his starship like a bandit looking at a fat sheep. Don't embarrass yourself, old man. Tesoro elbowed his father, who was flirting with a few female technicians, and said in a low voice. Shusag curled his lip and sighed. I'm thirsty. Little brats won't understand. Carrie and the others heard Shusag's words and shot him a "we understand" look. Then, they huddled together and started chattering away, even laughing at the same time. Tang Kakikyu chewed on the candy in her mouth. She wanted nothing more than to stab these old perverts with her gun. She was no longer the ignorant kid she used to be. She was familiar with Carrie and the others, so she knew they were talking about something indecent the moment she heard those familiar giggles. She slapped away Chifeng, who was wagging his tail at Carrie and the others with a curious look on his face. "Listen to my ass. It's not suitable for children." Tang Kakikyu snapped. Simon led Silen's group to the area where the engineers and technicians were located. Enji's workshop was located. This was because Silen had set up multiple passwords for this workshop later on. Without the password, it would be very difficult to enter unless the workshop's door was forcefully pried open. Ever since Simon took over the 6th Division, he hadn't paid attention to the engineers and technicians at all. All he did was issue an order and check the results. He didn't care about anything else. Moreover, most of the engineers and technicians who stayed behind were old people, and they all had a kind of reverence towards Enji and Silen. That was why no one forcefully pried open this workshop. Standing in front of the workshop, Silen flashed a friendly smile at the familiar faces around him and keyed in the password. The workshop that had been closed for almost 3 years was finally open. Cheto, Moon, and Sigma helped Silen copy the data and load the specimens Silen deemed important into the transport crate. Carrie and the others stayed outside the workshop. It would be troublesome if there were too many people in the workshop. Carrie and the others reminisced about the past and told Shusag and the others about their time in the 6th Division from time to time. The starship they were so familiar with no longer belonged to them. However, Carrie and the others couldn't help but lament for a moment. Even if it was a familiar starship, it was still scary without familiar teammates. It was nowhere near as warm and comfortable as the new 11th squad was. Simon left after leading Silen's group to their destination. It was more than enough for AB Squadron Commander to make it this far. Although it was completely different from his original plan, Simon didn't care about it right now. Right now, all he wanted to do was stay as far away from these people as possible. Simon felt incredibly uncomfortable whenever he saw them, especially when he was in front of Silen. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was inferior to Silen even though they were clearly about the same height. Was his aura inferior to Silen's? Simon refused to admit it. What the eye doesn't see, the heart doesn't grieve over. Although Simon had left, 2 vice commanders came to him after hearing the commotion. Carrie didn't recognize either of them, but they were probably new members of the 6th Division. Moreover, one of them wasn't originally a member of Vanguard, and he had only become a vice commander of the 6th Division after the 6th Division was annexed. The most eye-catching thing was that this vice commander was a beautiful woman with a hot body. Seeing the man and woman walking over, Carrie and the others only stared at the beauty and whistled, their eyes filled with ridicule. Tang Qiuqiu touched the shaft of her spear. She really wanted to just stab these embarrassing bastards and be done with it. "Yo, so you're from the new 11th B Squadron, aren't you? Are all of your team members here?" The man said with obvious sarcasm. He emphasized the word everyone when he said that. He was implying that this was all the new squad had. What a joke. Carrie and the others continued to stare at the beautiful woman as if they didn't hear what the man said. Tang Qiuqiu and Sha Rou were chatting quietly, and Chifeng was poking his head around to look at Silen's workshop. No one paid any attention to the man's sarcasm at all. It was like punching cotton. The man didn't respond. The man was about to say something else when the beautiful woman Carrie and the others were paying attention to walked up to him with a smile on her face. Shusag's eyes were glued to the long, white legs that were swaying in his direction. The beautiful vice commander looked at Carrie and the others. "We could have been teammates, but you all left when I took over." "Oh, so you're the one who took over the squad." Yudi, who was leaning against the wall of the tunnel, looked over. He flicked away the tail of the restless chameleon above his head that was interfering with his vision. The beautiful woman smiled. What I don't understand is why you're willing to follow Sillin from the very beginning instead of staying in the 6th Division or any other squad. Even if you can't become a vice commander with your abilities, you should at least be treated a lot better, right? In terms of experience, you guys don't lose to Celine. In terms of ability, a lot of teams have heard of your names. This time, no one responded to her. Carrie and the others were too busy admiring the beautiful woman to care about what she said. Yudi was annoyed by the mientuan on top of his head. He knew that the creature was bored, so he grabbed its tail and swung it towards the workshop where Sillin and Huimao were. Remember, don't cause trouble. The beautiful woman wasn't angry that no one was paying attention to her. She looked at Shu Sag, whose eyes were glued to her long legs. It would be easier to start with him. If Simon were still here, he would never let her mess with Shu Sag. After all, she wasn't as observant as Simon. Is this a newcomer? The beautiful vice-captain walked toward Shu Sag with a perfect smile on her face. But before she could even take her first step, she stiffened and froze. This was because a hand with a specialized finger bone that had turned into a knife appeared in front of her. She didn't even see the person's movement or react before the hand appeared in front of her. The others were the same. Those who were stronger like Carrie and the others could see a few afterimages, but the weaker ones couldn't even see them. They felt as if the person had teleported to another place. Regardless of whether they could see the afterimages or not, no one could say for sure that they could avoid the 5-finger blades. For a moment, there was only silence. The new faces behind the man and woman all pointed their guns at them, but they were stopped by the man. He didn't want to make the atmosphere any worse. Plus, he didn't think Shu Sag had any intention of harming them. Moreover, the man was clearly very strong. He wasn't sure if any of his people could survive a real shot. The 5 long finger blades glinted with a cold light. They were placed there casually, but those who were familiar with the distribution of blood vessels in the human body would notice that they were pointed at the beautiful vice commander's carotid artery, subclavian artery, aortic arch, axillary artery, and trachea. Not a single finger was pointed at the woman's heart. Pointing at the heart would be seen as an act of extreme contempt. After all, they were all members of Vanguard, so Shu Sag had to save them some face, right? He wondered what kind of expression the beautiful woman would make if she knew what Shu Sag was thinking. Should she thank him for saving her face, or should she be angry at his behavior? Tico looked at Shu Sag and smirked. As a doctor, she naturally understood the deeper meaning behind his actions. It seemed that this new member of the team was quite capable. That wasn't all. Shu Sag pressed himself against her like a drunken scoundrel, but he didn't flinch in the slightest. At the same time, his other hand slid down the beautiful vice-captain's waistline and across her exposed thigh with a finger knife that wasn't completely specialized. It was just enough to make contact with her skin and send a shiver down her spine, but it wasn't enough to cut through her skin. It was a very provocative move. Tang Kukikyu covered her face with her hands. As expected, everyone in this team is a bunch of scum. I'm really worried for Dia's 2-year-old son. I don't know what kind of person will be raised in a place full of scum like this. I hope Diaz won't vomit blood when his son grows up crooked. Right now, all Tesoro wanted to do was find a hole to crawl into. Ever since the old pervert left the Mist Bodhisattva Empire, he had turned from a hidden pervert to an overt one. He was flirting with a woman in front of his son and a couple of minors. Dad, where's your integrity? Did you get pickled with the vegetables? Tang Kukikyu, Sharo, and Tesoro cursed at the same time, old vagabond. Carrie's mouth was wide open. As expected of this uncle. Look at how he's flirting. TSK, this is so fucking exciting. The woman who was staring at Shu Sag turned pale. It wasn't because she was angry at Shu Sag's behavior, but because his eyes gave her goosebumps and chills. She couldn't describe the feeling, but it could be summed up in one word: contradiction. She was smiling frivolously and making frivolous remarks, but everything turned blurry under the gaze of those eyes. It was hard to tell what was real and what was fake, but it was also very oppressive. She wanted to say something, but she realized that even a single word was difficult to say. The two finger blades pressed against her neck were giving off a bloody chill. This man is too scary. Flirting? Games? No, none of those. Only the person involved knew that under the exaggeration, there was a chill that made people tremble. Shusag moved closer to the woman's ear and whispered, "That's a cheap trick. Use a better one next time. You need to be tactful with your words, or you'll be the one to suffer." After that, Shusag put away his finger blades and returned to his original spot. He rubbed his hair and pulled out a cigarette, but Tesoro snatched it away. "No smoking here." "Fine, I'll smoke when I get back." Shusag saved the cigarette from Tesoro's hand and put it back in his pocket like a treasure. Yudi gave Shusag a thumbs up. "Not bad." Shusag cocked his head to the side and gave him a half-hearted smile. "Sigh, life has worn me down." As they were talking, Sillin had finished packing up and noticed the strange atmosphere outside the workshop. Without saying anything, he waved at Carrie and the others. "Come on, let's head back." Shusag turned around and blew kisses at the young women around him. Tesoro kicked him before he finally followed. After Sillin and the others were finally gone, Simon asked the man and woman, "What do you think?" Neither of them said a word. They really didn't know what to say. They hadn't even tested the other party's true strength yet, let alone Sillin. With Shusag as an example, they didn't dare provoke him any further. Simon didn't get angry even though he didn't get an answer. He lay on his chair and stared at the ship flying further and further away on the screen. On the other hand, Sillin. After retrieving Enji's belongings, they temporarily placed them inside Sillin's workshop on the starship. They were all precious treasures. "Where are we going next, Commander?" Carrie rubbed his palms together. Right now, Sector Z was pretty much divided up. As a newly formed fleet, they had nothing to gain from this place. Moreover, there were too many forces in Sector Z right now, and it was easy for conflicts to arise. Many people would take advantage of the situation and loot it. Right now, the best way to replenish resources and gather more information was to leave Sector Z and head to another sector. It was impossible for them to go to the top 3 sectors. Those places were even more troublesome than Sector Z. Moreover, the 10 free trade sectors were all strong places. Comparatively speaking, only the lagging sectors would give them more room to perform. The question was, where in the lagging sectors should they head to now? Sector S used to be a prison sector, but now there were basically no prisons left. The great upheaval had caused the people inside the high-level prisons to become incredibly popular. Right now, the 3 major black forces were fighting each other, so it was inconvenient to interfere. They couldn't search for Genya's logbook either. Right now, Sector V was clamoring for independence, and they were clamoring to form some freedom alliance or something. It would be asking for trouble if they went there. After a brief discussion, everyone agreed to head to Sector T. It was also the place where Sillin first encountered Huimao. Sector T was full of alien beasts, so they went there to stock up on meat and make some money while they were at it. However, when they just entered Sector T, Sillin's group ran into a transport ship. The transport ship was parked quietly, and the only sound it emitted was an intermittent distress signal from time to time. Other than that, there was no other activity. "What's going on?" Sillin asked Yu. Yu spread his hands. "The ship isn't responding to our communication signal, and there's something wrong with the ship's power system. I can't get any more information, but there's one thing I'm sure of. If there are people inside the ship, then none of them are alive right now." Chapter 323. Not a single person is alive? Sillin asked with a frown. The gravity inside the transport ship is currently 0, and the oxygen content is extremely low. The energy fluctuation detection in the engine compartment shows that it is in a closed state. As for the life signal, I haven't detected any signal activity yet. Of course, there might be survivors, but the chances are very low, Moon replied. Also, the power system and main control system are all shut down, so I can't get more information. If we can enter the transport ship, I might be able to get more information. Shall we go? Sillin thinks for a moment before walking out of the control room. Me, Chedo, Shusag, and Moon will go check it out first. Carrie, get ready. I'll contact you if I need you. Roger that. Shusag walked into the equipment room and took out a protective suit, a breathing mask, a gun, a wrist blade, and a pair of gravity boots. Although some of the equipment wasn't exactly the same as the ones he used in the military, they were more or less the same. Hey, old man, be careful. Don't embarrass yourself too much, Tesoro said from a short distance away. Shusag put on the gravity boots and shot Tesoro a glance. You think I'm as weak as you? After putting on his equipment, Shusag reached out and rubbed Tesoro's hair until it was a mess. Then, he ran away before Tesoro could lose his temper. Asha couldn't help but shake her head. What an awkward father-son relationship. Both Sillin and Shusag had to wear protective gear, but Chedo and Moon didn't have to. Moon looked very excited. Unlike Sigma, he wasn't someone who could stay put for long. He loved adventures and trying new things. As the starship approached the transport ship, Sillin, Chedo, and Shusag stood on the bridge of the starship. Moon had already flown out and was standing right next to the transport ship's cabin door. The blue strip on his face flashed as he tried to decode the door's controls. Screech, very soon, the door opened. Just as Moon had said, the power system inside the transport ship had either malfunctioned or been shut down. Everything was dark. Sillin made a gesture, and the three of them jumped into the open hatch of the transport ship. The gravity boots stuck to the floor of the transport ship, allowing them to stand steadily. Holding back Huimao, who was about to rush inside, Sillin said, "Don't move. Stay here." Huimao flicked his ears and reluctantly squatted on Sillin's shoulder. He looked left and right while observing the situation inside. "We'll go in first," Sillin said to Yudi and then walked inside. "There are so many dead people inside," Huimao said. It had already detected the situation at the entrance of the passage not far away. "Sillin, do you want me to hack into the main power system and turn on the power?" Moon asked. "No, don't turn on the power first. Check to see what's wrong with the power system. Don't leave any traces." Sillin's intention was to let you see if the power system malfunction was accidental or man-made, but he couldn't leave any traces of intrusion. Got it. Yu was very confident in his abilities. As they walked deeper into the passage, they saw the things Huimao was talking about. The dead bodies, blood clots, and spurting blood inside the passage were all floating in the air due to the weightlessness. There were also some blood stains and bloody handprints on the walls of the passage. They were all left behind by the dead. "Who are they?" Shusag asked. "They look like normal employees." "I don't know." Sillin looked at the attire of these people. He didn't find anything iconic on their clothes, but judging from the material of their sailor suits, the forces behind them weren't small. "Try not to touch the blood droplets and blood clots. Keep them in their original state," Sillin said to Shusag and Chedo. A pause later, he turned to Huimao and emphasized, "Don't leave any claw marks." "All right." Huimao retracted his claws and raised his front paw to show Sillin the little pads on it. "Is this okay? These people." Shusag glanced at the floating body next to him and pointed at a knife wound. "It's a very professional knife wound." It was easy to tell how skilled a person was with a knife just by looking at the cut. Judging from the dead body in front of him, Shusag could tell that the person who killed them was a professional. There was no hesitation in their movements. After walking deeper into the passage, you opened a door and entered the control room of the main cabin. There were even more dead bodies floating here, and some of them looked like they were in shock and disbelief. Perhaps they hadn't reacted in time to the slaughter at all. Most of them weren't holding any weapons, and judging from the genetic analysis, they were all ordinary people. What do you see? Sillin asked Shusag. It was a one-sided massacre. I can see that the Slayers are a well-trained and well-equipped team. They didn't even leave any obvious traces behind. Plus. Shusag pointed at a person floating not far away. That person should be someone powerful, right? Sillin looked at the direction Shusag was pointing at and saw a person floating there. However, the fatal wound on this person wasn't a knife wound, but a gun wound. The genetic analysis showed that this person was a rank A genotype. The League of Stars used gene rank as the standard of measurement, so they couldn't let their guard down against a rank A genotype even if they hadn't gone through any professional training. That was why the killers didn't engage in melee combat. Instead, they used a sniper's bullet to end this person's life. The bullet's penetrative power was so strong that it almost blew the person's heart out of his chest. However, the bullet didn't have any other distinguishing features. They couldn't tell what kind of gun it was, so it was obviously disguised. They were all wearing the same flight suits, but the Slayers were able to tell which of them had A-rank genotypes. This proved that the Slayers were very familiar with the distribution of the people on this transport ship. They knew which ones were stronger and which ones were weaker. Then, they came up with the most labor-saving and time-saving plan. Do you know how to write a report? Sillin looked at Shusag. I'm good. I used to write a summary report after a mission in the army. Let's go back and sum it up. Sure. After walking around the ship, they saw that the storage of the transport ship had been emptied. Judging from the residue, the storage was filled with high-quality energy blocks, some rare metal ores, and some high-end equipment. Anyone would be pissed if they lost something this valuable. I wonder who the unlucky bastard is, Huimao said slowly. He was prepared to come here to get some benefits and save up some money, but he didn't get anything at all. How disappointing. The problem is, for something this valuable, they would definitely send strong guards to escort it, right? Where are they? Shusag looked around and didn't see any guards around. Most of the people hovering outside were normal employees. There were a few decent ones, but they were the minority and didn't seem to be part of the security force. There's one over there. Cheto pointed at a passage. He could tell that the person there was much stronger than the people in front of them. The passage Cheto pointed at was connected to the storage, and there was a spiral staircase at the turning point that led to the next floor. The turning point led to the control cabin and the storage, and the bathroom. Other than the guard in the passageway, there were two other guards floating at the turning point. Their bodies were also riddled with gunshot wounds, killed in one shot. Do you need reinforcements, Commander? Carrie asked through the communicator. Not yet. Sillin was afraid that more people would leave more traces. He didn't want anyone to know that they were here. The guard's rest area should be up there. Cheto stopped Shusag just as he was about to walk up. It's poisonous. What? Shusag pulled his foot back. There's very little of it here, but the higher we go, the thicker it gets, Cheto said. It is. It's fatal to the human body once it reaches a certain concentration, Moon confirmed. Sillin and Shusag checked their protective suits before unfolding their breathing masks to cover their entire heads. There were no gaps between them at all. Let's go. The higher they went, the thicker the poisonous gas became. When they went up the stairs, they discovered that the door was closed. However, there was a small crack on the side through which the poisonous gas leaked out. Ready? Moon looked at Sillin. After receiving a ready gesture from Sillin, he opened the door. What he saw was nauseating. Due to the erosion of this atomized poisonous gas, those who inhaled it or came into contact with it through their skin would have their nerves rapidly necrotic. This necrotic phenomenon would gradually spread throughout the body, and the muscles and fat on the body would expand like bubbles, making the whole person look like a malignant tumor. This room was so full of tumors that it was impossible to tell a person apart. The small crack on the door was made by these people with guns before they died, but because of the effect of the poisonous gas, they could only make a small crack. They could not persevere at all. The two who died at the turning point must have escaped the poisonous gas by going to the bathroom. They didn't know that a sniper was waiting for them there. Most of these people are rank A genotypes, Sillin said after a quick inspection. Coupled with the armor and clothes around them, he could confirm that these people were the guards of the transport ship. But why were all the guards gathered here? Can you find the leader of these people, Moon? Sillin asked. I don't know, but I'll try to restore their communication records. There are a lot of tampered records in this transport ship. The killers had tampered with the surveillance records and some of the ship's communication records. This meant that some of their information might have been exposed. If they could restore this information, they could figure out more about the killers. The culprit was obviously an expert in this field. With the combined efforts of Moon and Hui Mao, they were able to restore most of the information, but some had been erased too thoroughly and couldn't be recovered. Still, with these restored records, they could learn more about the inside story. Judging from the communication records, these guards had been summoned. The person who could summon them must be the person in charge of the guards or the captain of the transport ship. The person who summoned them was notified through the communicator in the control room, Moon said. But when we came from the control room, there was no one there at all. Shusag remembered this very clearly. He was still puzzled at the time. Sillin thinks for a moment. Let's go back and take a look. Moon, continue to restore other information with Wheeze. Also, give me the list of the people on this transport ship. Can you get that? If not, I'll do it myself. Of course we can. Hui Mao and Moon answered in unison. After closing the door at the top of the stairs again, Sillin returned to the control room and found the control room. Logically speaking, the captain should be here, but he wasn't. He didn't see anyone who looked like the captain anywhere else. Sillin didn't look for any of the more secluded corners. Could the captain have hidden himself somewhere? No, he's here. Cheto drew a circle in the air with his finger. He should be here. However, he's been decomposed. The elemental ratio here is obviously different from the outside world. I compared the elemental types and amounts in a human body, and it's very close to the amount of 2 people. Shusag felt a chill run down his spine. What kind of person could be so ruthless? Not only was he slaughtered, he didn't even leave their corpses intact. 2 people. If one of them is the captain, then who is the other? Why would they go to such great lengths to make these 2 disappear? Sillin was puzzled. It just so happened that Moon and Hui Mao had recovered some of the deleted and altered member records. Here, this is the captain you've been talking about. A picture and some words appeared on Moon's projection. Sillin didn't recognize the person in the projection, and Cheto didn't have any information about him. Show me the others' profiles, Sillin said. Moon switched the projection, and the images swayed one after another. Wait. Sillin suddenly said, move 2 to the front. Yes, this is the one. The person in the projection was the captain of the transport ship's escort team. He looked pretty ordinary, and he didn't stand out in a crowd. But Sillin remembered him. It had been a few years, but Sillin still remembered him. The first time Sillin met Aflan Duance and accepted his first mission as a hunter of Vanguard Division 6, he had fought 2 of Aflan's bodyguards. The person in the projection was the one Sillin had sent flying. In other words, this transport ship was actually the Duance family's cargo. However, the cargo was hidden very well, and it was obvious from the crew's attire that they didn't intend to expose themselves at all. If someone else had come here, they definitely wouldn't have known that this was the Aflan family's cargo. Robbing the Aflan family's cargo? Which side did they belong to? If one of the people who were dismembered was the captain, then the other person had to be this bodyguard. Do you know them? Shusag asked. It could be the Duance family. It's just a guess. A great family. Is there some kind of conspiracy going on here? There's no way he wouldn't have made preparations without my understanding of the Duance family's captain. However, a one-sided massacre like this, even though he was prepared, can only mean that there's a spy in their ranks again. Let's gather some more information and leave. Then why are we gathering this information so carefully? Shusag pointed at the floating people and beads of blood, and then at the projection Moon had projected. Since we're already here, we can't let this trip go to waste. We can't let ourselves be stained with blood, and we need to fish for more chips. If we have the chance, we can sell this chip. That's not easy. Shusag sighed. Can't help it. Those old farts are more cunning than the last. We have to be prepared if we want to fish for money from them. Otherwise, we might get bitten in the back if we try to be a good guy. But let's investigate here. How much can we get in return? I can't say for sure. That depends on how much information we gather. Got it. Shusag made a got it gesture with his hand and went to examine the wounds and other details of the victims. Different gene levels corresponded to different wounds and possible opponents, as well as an estimate of the killer's combat strength. Shusag was very familiar with all of this. Although he had been out of the military for a long time, he still retained some of his professional habits. It would be much easier for him to organize the report when he returned to the starship. Sillin went to the engine compartment to take a look. There were obvious signs of human intervention there. Someone had entered the engine compartment and cut off the main power supply, causing the transport to stop sailing. They had also interfered with the main power system and changed the gravity inside the transport ship. Before they left the transport ship, Sillin asked Moon to set up a surveillance program to see who would come back to the ship after them. After returning to the starship, Sillin held a small meeting and told Yudi and the others not to tell anyone about the transport ship. Otherwise, they would get into trouble. Alright, that's it. Don't think about anything else. Sillin pointed at a planet on the star map. Our destination is this hunting planet. Let's go eat some meat. Alright, Xiao Shang. Let's see who can hunt the most prey this time. Carrie looked at Xiao Shang. Let's compete. I'm not afraid of you. I want to join too. Tang Qiuqiu raised her hands. Sillin ignored their small activities and went back to the lounge to lie down and take a nap. 5 minutes later, Sillin opened his eyes helplessly and looked at Huimao, who was pacing back and forth. What's the matter? Say it. Nothing. The gray cat stopped in its tracks and turned its head to the side, but it was obvious that it lacked confidence. Sillin pinched Huimao's furry ears and gently pulled them up. Really? No. All right. Sillin let go of Huimao's ears and stared at Huimao, watching as the stupid cat's tail became stiffer and stiffer. Finally, Huimao could not take it anymore and spat out a red gem. The ruby was the size of Sillin's pinky nail. It was as red as blood. Under the light, it reflected a strange light that could make people intoxicated. There was a fracture on the ruby, as if it had fallen off due to an external force. Right now, Weeza's ability to measure value was growing stronger and stronger. At the time, it had spotted the ruby from a pile of floating flesh and blood and swallowed it whole while Sillin wasn't paying attention. It thought that this ruby was worth at least 100 bags of fish biscuits. But Sillin said that it would try to keep the inside as it was, so Huimao felt guilty and was restless. Looking at the ruby in his hand, Sillin put it into a small box. Keep it. If it's not useful, I'll sell it and buy you cat food. Hearing Sillin's answer, Huimao was very satisfied. Huimao quickly curled up in a circle next to Sillin and began to sleep. It still had to hunt when it woke up, and it needed to conserve its energy. Sillin closed his eyes, but he did not really fall asleep. He was thinking about a problem. According to the shape of the ruby, the one Huimao got should be on a woman's ring, and it should be very valuable. But on that transport ship, Sillin did not find anyone that matched the member information that Moon had sorted out. There were less than 1/10 of the women on the transport ship, and they were all ordinary staff. Who was a woman who could wear a ruby of this level? Chapter 324. Following Diaz and Carrie's suggestion, Sillin selected 3 hunting planets. They were more familiar with hunting planets, and they knew which planets were more suitable for the squad's current situation. When the time came, they would choose the most suitable planet according to the current situation. There were 3 purposes for going hunting. 1 was to stock up on food, 2 was to get some good stuff to sell for money, and 3 was for everyone to get some exercise and practice. Due to the current situation, the main targets of hunting had changed a little. In the past, they mainly went for rare species, but now they mainly hunted for meat. After all, not many people like to eat nutrient pills and drink nutrient fluids all day long. Due to the current situation, the meat produced by the farms of the large financial groups was more expensive. Even so, the supplies still couldn't meet the demand. Armies from all sides needed it. Hunters, on the other hand, were more inclined to solve the food problem themselves. Because of this, fights between hunters often broke out on hunting planets after the situation became chaotic. Many people never returned from hunting planets. Some of them were killed by exotic beasts while hunting, while others were killed by other hunters. Before they left for the hunting planet, Scylla had asked Carrie to explain the situation of the hunting star zone to the newbies and the things they needed to pay attention to once they arrived. During the hunt, not only would they have to face alien beasts that were more cunning than normal beasts, they would also have to be on guard against other hunters that were hiding in the dark. Since there weren't many people in the team, the demand for food wasn't high. Therefore, they chose a hunting planet with commercial value. Some of the exotic beasts there were more difficult to hunt, but their value was also much higher. Now that there were fewer people hunting these exotic beasts, their prices were gradually rising. For Huimao, this was undoubtedly a good opportunity to make some money. Scylla had asked Huimao if it wanted to visit the planet it used to live on, but Huimao had rejected it decisively. It didn't think there was anything to see there. Moreover, it had only been a few years since they left. It was too short. There was no need. In other words, there was still a difference in the minds of animals and humans. A person who had been away from their birthplace for a few years might want to go back and take a look, but this cat wouldn't. Right now, it only had eyes for exotic beasts waiting to be slaughtered. At first, Shusag was worried that Huimao would be traumatized by the idea of hunting exotic beasts, but he soon realized that he was overthinking things. The starship remained in space outside the planet. Scylla and the others took a spaceship to the planet, while the starship hid in stealth mode. There were still quite a few starships outside the planet. There was no need to collide with them. Sigma and Moon weren't with Scylla's group. They had other things to do. Sigma had set up a small indoor fruit garden on the starship for the sole purpose of enjoying the process. Now that it had followed Scylla and the others to a hunting planet, Sigma's goal was to grow all kinds of fruit trees that were highly nutritious and tasty. Once these fruit trees were planted on the starship, not only would Scylla and the others be able to eat fresh fruits, but they could also be made into nutrient fluids and used to make their own food and clothing. That was why Sigma and Moon had gone off to search for saplings and seeds. They would keep in touch with Scylla and the others until they had to leave. Moreover, Scylla had a feeling that Moon would be able to protect himself. The 2 robots might look harmless, but they were very destructive. Besides, Moon might be a robot, but he was smarter than some of the old guys. Scylla wasn't worried that they would be tricked. After collecting their equipment, Scylla and the others entered the forest. The exotic beasts they were looking for weren't here. Instead, they had to pass through the forest to reach the rocky area. The reason they started in the forest was because they were looking for meat in the forest. It was also a warm-up activity. Scylla's group was spread out in a specific formation. They would form groups of 2 or 3, and there was a certain distance between each group. However, if a group were to meet with an accident, the others would be able to rush over to their rescue. Moreover, this formation could also warn each other and form a relatively safe area. Scylla and Yudi were in a group. The Miantuan, the little chameleon, lay obediently on Yudi's shoulder. It was the weakest fighter in the team, so the Miantuan, who was always afraid of death, was especially obedient at times like this. In contrast, Hui Mao was bouncing left and right like an ADHD patient. Silen told it not to run around and disturb the prey, so Hui Mao could only jump around Silen's area, roll around, and chew on some grass. If it sensed prey, it wouldn't need Silen or Yudi to do anything. The others had already started hunting. What Silen could hear wasn't the sound of gunshots, but the soft sound of bullets hitting the bones of the prey. The bullets and firearms used for hunting were different from the ones they usually used. The firearms were well silenced. There were transport robots transporting the prey onto the spaceplane, so all they had to do was hunt. What do you think about that incident? Yudi asked Silen in a low voice. Knowing that Yudi was talking about the transport ship they encountered not long ago, Silen answered, I'm not sure yet. The transport ship should belong to the Duance family, but we have no clue who the killers are. After all, it's possible that anyone could have done it given the current situation. Those lunatics at Sector V. Do you think it's possible? Yudi asked again. Among Silen's suspects, the people at Sector V were also at the top of his list. They were a bunch of lunatics. It was fine if you didn't mess with them, but once you did, it was very difficult to shake them off. Moreover, those people were bloodthirsty. They enjoyed the pleasure of killing. Judging from the terrible state of the transport ship, it was possible that they were the culprits. Ever since Silen killed the lone hunter Osculos, the people who were once suppressed by Osculos were now venting their bloodlust all over the League of Stars. According to Silen's information, similar incidents had happened many times in the League of Stars already. However, Silen rejected this speculation later on. They're organized and planned. Also, they made the transport ship's captain and the escort captain disappear to cover up their tracks. If it's those people at Sector V, why would they do that? That's true. Also, the miasma gas doesn't look like something the people at Sector V would use. If it's them, I think it's more likely to be a bomb. It looks like you don't think it's them either. Silen looked at Yudi. Yudi sighed. Right now, the entire League of Stars is like a shroud of mist. Some people look like they're getting along well on the surface, but who knows how many times they've fought each other behind the scenes. The military, the government, and the big families all have their own trump cards. The chaos might look sudden, but in reality, all parties were prepared for it since a long time ago. The signs were there even before you went missing, and even the tiniest spark could cause a great riot. It was only when Osculos, one of the star rank hunters, was rumored to be dead that the chaos erupted. Silen suddenly remembered something. Where did the news of Osculos' death come from? I heard that it's from Sector V, or they wouldn't have attacked us so openly and declared that they've established a freedom alliance. Silen remembered that the only people who knew that he killed Osculos were Ji Feng, Gaydar, and Azrael. The one who spread the news had to be one of them, or someone else. These people were all hoping to reap enough benefits from the chaos. It could be anyone. What's wrong? Did you think of something? Yudi asked. I'm trying to figure out who spread the news. The person who spread the news must be hoping that the League of Stars will fall into chaos. That's true, and they're using the thugs at Sector V to create chaos. If you were in my shoes, who would you suspect if you had to choose from Ji Feng, Gaydar, or Azrael? Silen looked at Yudi. Yudi paused and looked a little serious. Do you know something, Silen? Silen didn't say anything and waited for Yudi's answer. Yudi thought carefully for a moment. He hadn't stopped collecting information since he left the 6th Division, and he had stolen a lot of information from a lot of forces during the chaos. He just hadn't told anyone about it. The news of Osculo's death was leaked by the leader of a violent organization at Sector V, but I don't know who told him. It was a fuse that caused the chaos that had been brewing in the League of Stars for a long time to erupt all at once. As for the people you mentioned, to be honest, any one of them is a possibility. If they really know the truth, they'll spread the news. Yudi didn't hold back just because Ji Feng was the regiment commander. He told Silen his thoughts and the information he had gathered in the past, hoping that it would serve as a reference. After Yudi was done, Silin smiled. You've said a lot. It sounds like it wasn't easy to get all this information, is it? Then let me tell you something else. Osculos is dead. I killed him. Yudi nearly fell to the ground when his legs gave out. The Miantuan on his shoulder rolled on the ground before climbing back up to Yudi's shoulder in a hurry. Are you serious? It was because of Osculos that I left the base. That being said, I would have died a long time ago if Cheto and Whis hadn't helped me. Yudi stuck his fingers through his hair and scratched his scalp hard. Then, he looked at Silin and chuckled. It looks like I'm following an amazing captain. A thought occurred to Yudi, and he added, don't worry, I won't leak this information to anyone. Speaking of which, did the people you mentioned know about it? Yes. The duo analyzed the current situation for a moment. Then, Shusag sent them a message through the communicator saying that they had run into 2 heavily injured hunters. What's wrong? Carrie and Xiao Shang ran over to ask Silin. It's nothing. Yudi, you head toward the destination with Carrie and the others. I'll go check on Shusag. After informing Huimao, Silin ran toward Shusag himself. Shusag, Tesoro, and Ba Dao were in the same group. Since they weren't normal humans, they got along pretty well. Lying in front of the trio were 2 heavily injured hunters. Their bones were broken in many places, and their internal organs were damaged to varying degrees. They needed to be treated as soon as possible. Some of their injuries were caused by alien beasts, while others were caused by humans. It was the younger-looking man who helped his comrade over and asked for help from Shusag and the other 2. If it's not convenient for you to help, you can sell me some stimulant potions and nutrient pills. The young man took out a blood-stained debit card and slid his finger across it. The amount inside was displayed on the card, 100000. When Silin arrived, he saw the young man talking with Shusag and Ba Dao about buying stimulant potions, nutrient pills, and some other healing medicine. At the same time, the young man was hinting to Shusag and the others not to think about killing them and robbing them. Though the 2 of them were heavily injured, a fight to the death might not end well for Shusag and the others. Silin looked at the young man with an odd expression. What a coincidence. He wasn't sure if he was unlucky or overly lucky. Captain. When Ba Dao saw Silin, he briefly explained what happened just now and the young man's request. They did have stimulating drugs and nutrient pills, but as a hunter he had seen too many deceptions. Ba Dao didn't know if he should just kill these 2 people and be done with them, or make a deal with them. That was why Shusag reported to Silin and let Silin make the decision. He didn't expect Silin to come to him directly. Glancing at the young man on the ground, Silin sat down on a piece of dirt nearby. Repeat what you just said. The young man repeated his request patiently. He didn't mention anything about their identities or the reason why they were in this state. As a fellow hunter, Ba Dao didn't ask for the details because he knew he wouldn't get any useful information even if he forced it. Yeah, Silin replied noncommittally. How many stimulant potions and nutrient pills do you want? The young man was about to answer when he sensed something and turned his head to look. He saw a fat cat with a sparrow in its mouth running towards him at a speed that did not match its size. It was even running and jumping from tree trunk to the ground, then to the trunk of another tree. It looked like the fat cat was in a good mood. However, because of this cat, the young man's words stopped abruptly. His face contorted into a grimace. Shusag and the other 2, including the young man's companion, didn't understand why the young man looked like he wanted to shit when he saw Huimao running toward him with a sparrow in its mouth. His entire body stiffened. Huimao didn't look at the others when it ran over with the sparrow in its mouth. It jumped onto Silin's shoulder and was slapped down by Silin. If you want to play, go play somewhere else. Silin knew Huimao well enough to know that the cat only caught the sparrow as a toy. If the sparrow was still alive, it would swallow it. If it was dead, it wouldn't eat it. The sparrow in Huimao's mouth was still kicking. Its wings, which were pinned down by the cat's teeth, didn't vibrate much, but it seemed to be alive and well. With the sparrow in its mouth, Huimao was about to go play on the grass when its eyes swept across the stiff young man who looked like he wanted to stuff his head into his pants. Suddenly, Huimao's eyes lit up. Meow. Aren't you the ghost butterfly kid who owes me 1,000,000 yuan? It emphasized the words, he owes me 1,000,000 yuan. Guidai Shichi roared in his heart, what the fuck? Why did I run into it again? Guidai Shichi lay on the ground and didn't say a word. He had already roared in his heart countless times. At the same time, he thought that if the cat was here, the kid had to be nearby as well. Seeing that Guidai Shichi didn't say anything, Huimao thought that he still wanted to deny it, so he told him about how Guidai Shichi owed Silan 1,000,000 yuan for a bottle of stimulant potion and a nutrition pill. In less than 2 minutes, everyone knew that Guidai Shichi owed Silan 1,000,000 yuan, and that he had been tricked. I've already paid back the money. Guidai Shichi said through gritted teeth. You did owe me, anyway. Huimao ignored the sparrow that had already flapped its wings and ran away. He looked at Guidai Shichi and the people around him with glowing eyes. You want to buy potions again? Guidai Shichi didn't say anything, and the people around him were also unusually quiet. Shusag wanted to laugh. However, he felt that it wasn't the right time to laugh, so he held it in until the muscles on his face twitched. Since Guidai Shichi didn't say anything, Huimao asked Silan. Silan, are they buying potions and pills again? How much do they want this time? Let me calculate the price. Hearing Huimao's words, Guidai Shichi suddenly looked up at Huimao, then followed Huimao's line of sight to the person sitting on the dirt block. Silan. That's me. Silan nodded. You can't recognize me now that I've changed my appearance. Guidai Shichi felt that his luck had been very bad lately. When he decided to ask for help, he had thought of many scenarios and how he should approach the hunters, but he never thought that it would be this person in front of him. Silan looked different from before, but the way he spoke was very familiar to Guidai Shichi. Coupled with the cat, Guidai Shichi was sure that it was the person in front of him. Guidai Shichi had experienced that kid's character firsthand. He was definitely a scumbag. That cat was a scumbag too. Although Guidai Shichi looked like he wanted to puke whenever he saw Silan and Huimao, Shusag could tell that Guidai Shichi was a lot more relaxed than before. After all, they knew each other very well now. Meanwhile, Sigma had found a few good seedlings, but they were surrounded by thorny bushes. Although it and Moon tried to fly over, the thorny bushes were so thick that they completely surrounded the seedlings. It would take a lot of effort to get them out. Sigma was about to start when Moon stopped him. What's the point? Moon raised an arm and pulled back his fingers, turning his palm into a cannon. Boom! When the dust settled, all the thorny bushes were gone except for the seedlings at the center. Although they were still entangled by some thorny vines, they were a lot easier to deal with than before. See? It's so much easier this way. Not far away from them, the hunters who thought they had hidden themselves well were also pondering whether they should make a move or not. The two robots before them seemed to be even harder to deal with than those ferocious beasts. Should they make a move or not? Before they could make up their minds, however, Moon pointed his cannon at the bushes they were hiding in. After a brief moment of silence, Moon turned to Sigma and said, "Come on, let's keep looking for seedlings and seeds." Sigma. Yu's actions kept Carrie and the others busy for a while. Carrie switched the bullets, pulling down the magazine for hunting small beasts and switching it to a magazine specifically for dealing with medium to large armored exotic beasts. Their guns were 2-in-1 so that they could react faster in such a situation. Bang! A bullet accurately shot into the eye of an exotic beast charging at them, exploding right where its eye was. It was just enough to blast the exotic beast's brain into smithereens, but still keep the horn on its head intact. Carrie looked at Tang Qiuqiu not far away. He wasn't the one who fired the shot. While he was still aiming, Tang Qiuqiu fired the first shot, accurate as always. It seemed like Tang Qiuqiu's marksmanship hadn't fallen behind in the past 2 to 3 years. Her standards were still the same. After Tang Qiuqiu fired the first shot, the others opened fire one after another. Meanwhile, Shikai's robot would take the opportunity to cut off the horns of the dead exotic beasts, to prevent the most valuable parts from falling into the hands of others. After the hunt was over, Carrie and the others would return to deal with the exotic beasts they had killed. After all, they didn't have the time to do such delicate work, and the exotic beasts that kept coming at them with their pincers wouldn't give them the chance to do so, either. Ba Dao knew that the hunt had officially begun, so he couldn't stay there any longer. Sillin had the 3 of them join in the hunt, while he left Guidai Shichi and Swallowtail to watch over them. After all, the 2 of them were in a critical period of recovery. If no one was there to watch over them, it would be very easy for them to be ambushed. Even a small exotic beast could take them out. Is that okay? Let's leave Sillin alone, Shu Sag asked after he left with Ba Dao. Sillin is very strong. Plus, with Lord Wheezing around, they should be fine as long as they don't run into a large group, Ba Dao replied. Shu Sag had never seen Sillin fight before, and neither had he seen Hui Mao use his claws. He knew that the cat was no ordinary person, but he couldn't imagine just how strong it was. Swallowtail was a little surprised that Sillin would stay behind to watch over them, but when he looked at Guidai Shichi, he realized that this was the kind of expression the guy should have when he was in a dungeon, so he wasn't surprised at all. Swallowtail couldn't help but change his opinion of the man who was a lot younger than he was. Plus, Vanguard and Lan Hudi weren't enemies. Hey, Sillin, are you still in the 6th division? What's your position now? Guidai Shichi asked. Before Sillin could answer, Hui Mao raised his chin and declared cockily, "We're the 11th squad now." The 11th B squadron? Doesn't Vanguard only have 10 B squadrons? Guidai Shichi was puzzled. We have 11 now. Sillin just built them, Hui Mao said proudly. Why are you so cocky? It's not like you built them, Guidai Shichi taunted. Guidai Shichi thought that Hui Mao would explode in anger, but nothing happened after a while. Hui Mao ignored Guidai Shichi. His attention was drawn to something else. The cat's ears were twitching, and the long hair inside his ears were vibrating as well. Like a radar, they reflected the situation around them. After moving his ears, Hui Mao suddenly said, "Sillin." Sillin had obviously noticed it as well. The commotion seemed to have spread too far and exceeded Sillin's estimation. Noticing Sillin and Hui Mao's unusual behavior, Guidai Shichi looked at Swallowtail. Swallowtail was also looking puzzled. Neither of them had noticed anything out of the ordinary. Perhaps it was because of their injuries that their senses had decreased. Sillin sensed activity in the distance. It was the direction where Carrie and the others were hunting. However, Sillin had a bad feeling about it. Sillin had always trusted his instincts, so he immediately contacted Yudi and the others and told Carrie and the others to give up on hunting and return to Vanguard immediately. When they heard Sillin's words, although they were a little reluctant to part with the prey in front of them, they immediately retreated according to Sillin's orders. What's wrong? Guidai Shichi looked at Sillin. Sillin didn't answer directly. Instead, he injected Guidai Shichi and Swallowtail with 2 potions. Sillin's speed was too fast. Guidai Shichi and Swallowtail had no time to react. Perhaps it was because they had let their guard down in front of Sillin that they couldn't stop Sillin. Swallowtail was shocked. Even though he had let his guard down, Sillin's movements were too fast. Even if he hadn't been injured, he might not have been able to dodge. Without any warning, he couldn't have guessed that Sillin would make such a move. Don't worry. It's just a potion to help you recover faster. It's much more expensive than the ones we gave you before. Swallowtail carefully felt his body. The potion really did make him feel a lot better. Even his breathing was a lot smoother. Guidai Shichi's face twitched. What now? Ask for more money. Boom, boom, boom. There were 3 consecutive noises. The noises didn't come from this direction. Judging from the distance, they were clearly shaking. Guidai Shichi shuddered. An earthquake? Silen stepped on the trunk of a nearby tree and leaped up to the top. He looked into the distance. A flock of startled birds had already taken to the sky. They were flying in his direction. Silen turned on his communicator and said to Yudi and the others, "Get back here now. Don't fly. Go straight to the forest." At the same time, Silen had Shikai send more robots to the area. He didn't want to be delayed if they ran into a beast horde. Realizing the urgency of the situation, everyone sped up. Silen told Hui Mao to connect to the spaceplane and wait for Carrie and the others to arrive before leaving. Meanwhile, Moon and Sigma were flying toward the city as well after they received word of what had happened. "Was that an earthquake just now, Moon?" Sigma asked while flying. "I don't know. It didn't look like a natural earthquake." Sigma was puzzled. Before coming to this area, he had studied the map. This wasn't an earthquake zone, so why would an earthquake of this magnitude happen? Even when it fired its cannons earlier, it didn't cause such a huge commotion. The group of people rushing toward the spaceplane had to avoid small exotic beasts that were running around in panic every now and then. They also had to avoid trees and bushes in the forest. There were no such obstacles in the air, but Silen had warned them not to run in the air. They couldn't fly even if they were on hoverboards. Therefore, it was really depressing to watch the transport robots fly freely in the air while they had to avoid so many obstacles on the ground. Carrie shot an exotic beast that pounced at him and shouted, "Why are there so many exotic beasts? Did we run into a beast horde? It's a beast horde. Why are they all coming this way?" Yudi looked at the growing number of exotic beasts around them. These were the ones that were lucky. They didn't have much attack power, and there were still large exotic beasts chasing after them. No wonder Silen had told them to retreat. The epicenter of the earthquake had come from 3 different directions in a triangular formation. If they had been any slower, they would have been surrounded by these beasts, and it would have been a lot more dangerous than it was now. Seriously, why is there an earthquake at a time like this? Xiao Shang grumbled. "Stop complaining and get back to the spaceplane." Yudi had just finished saying that to Xiao Shang when he heard 3 pops. One of them was only half a meter away from him, while the other 2 came from Xiao Shang and Carrie. After the 3 pops, 3 people wearing stealth equipment appeared and fell to the ground. All 3 of them had their heads blown off. Shusag was about to react when he saw a person appear in front of him and Tesoro. A slender blade pierced through his neck, and a figure appeared behind him. The person was holding a blade, and the blade was only 10 centimeters away from him. The blade beside Shusag's neck gave off a hair-raising aura as it pierced through the person's forehead. The person in front of him was none other than Silen. Silen and Hui Mao had rushed over as soon as they sensed something was amiss. It was just as he thought. Someone was trying to kill them. Shusag's eyelids twitched uncontrollably. If it weren't for Silen, either he or Tesoro would have been seriously injured or killed on the spot. These people were just too good at concealment, and the beast stampede had given them the perfect opportunity to conceal their auras. "Someone's here. We're under attack." The others reacted quickly. Screech, Shikai released a strong interference electromagnetic signal. This electromagnetic signal could cause the invisibility equipment on those people to malfunction. As a robot maker, he knew stealth equipment all too well, and he carried an anti-stealth device with him out of habit. Thanks to Shikai's interference signal, everyone could see the intruders even without the aid of a device. It wasn't very clear, but it was enough. Snowball, who had always looked like a naive bear, swelled to a height of 5 meters, long fangs protruding, and its eyes changed. Its silver pupils were like a world of ice and snow, cold and cruel, making it look very sinister. Tang Chocho threaded a strap under Snowball's armpit and tied it securely around its shoulder. This way, she could stay on Snowball's shoulder steadily, and at the same time, borrow Snowball's protection to look for opportunities to shoot the figures that appeared due to the interference. Meanwhile, Shueqiu was cleaning up the brainless alien beasts around him. He swung his arm and sent a couple of them flying. Judging from his strength, there was no way they could survive. Shueqiu might look clumsy, but he wasn't slow in the slightest. Even with his speed, Tang Qiuqiu was able to find opportunities to shoot at the intruders. Not only that, she was also able to land a headshot on every one of them. This kind of teamwork was probably something they had done many times before. Their teamwork was excellent, and they reacted quickly to the ambush as well. Shu Sag was busy taking care of the assassins around him. He had been careless earlier because he didn't pay attention to the beast horde. At the same time, this experience also made him understand that this was a new world with a new set of rules. Since he had decided to lead a wonderful life in this new world with Tesoro, he had to accept the cruelty of this world as soon as possible and integrate into it. This wasn't the Mist Bodhisattva Empire. This was a place where strength mattered the most. Every assassin here had gone through countless life and death battles, so their physical and mental fortitude were far superior to the average person's. Even Shikai's invisible robots couldn't keep up with the assassins' movements once they discovered their targets. Even if they could keep up with the assassins in terms of raw speed, they couldn't do anything about it if their minds couldn't keep up. Therefore, they had to rely on their own strength to solve the problem. Pay attention to Qifeng. Shu Sag said to Tesoro. Leave the others to me. Pay attention to Qifeng's movements and claws. Shu Sag had been paying attention to Qifeng since a long time ago. It wasn't because Qifeng wasn't human like them, but because of Qifeng's claws. In battle, Qifeng's claws would always strike from the most precise and effortless angle. It wasn't a deliberate move, but an instinctive one. This was what shocked Shu Sag the most. Not even he could claim that his claws were better than Qifeng's. Moreover, Qifeng might look small, but even Shu Sag had no choice but to dodge his explosive power. He hoped that Tesoro could learn something useful from Qifeng. Qifeng aside, Shu Sag had also paid attention to Tang Qiuqiu. The two kids fought almost entirely on instinct and instinct. What kind of environment did these two children grow up in? Talent? Shu Sag had always believed that talent was only a decoration. The key was still the person. It was like a blade. No matter how sharp it was, it all depended on who wielded it. Only those who wielded it well wouldn't waste it, and those who didn't know how to use it would only be a waste. Cheto was the only one who fought bare-handed. Of course, Shu Sag and his kind didn't count. Their claws were their own weapons. But Cheto fought bare-handed. When Carrie looked over, he just happened to see Cheto twisting the gun barrel of a killer's hand like a fried dough twist and removing the killer's entire arm. There wasn't a single drop of blood on Cheto. This is too fucking violent. Although Shikai's interference was effective, it was only limited to those who wore stealth equipment. There were also some killers who could turn invisible to begin with, so they wouldn't be affected by the electromagnetic interference. Fortunately, there were only a few of them. After Shikai's interference forced the killers to show themselves, Sillin turned his attention to the invisible people and eliminated them first. Ever since the chip inside his body was fully activated, Sillin's constitution had improved by leaps and bounds. It wasn't obvious from the outside, but both his speed and perception were far better than before. Sillin could see the invisible people as well. He couldn't see their complete appearance, only their silhouettes. But that was already a lot better than the others. Sha Ro could see the invisible people because of her special constitution, but her abilities were limited. She couldn't react in time even if she could see them. There was still a huge gap between her and the professional killers. While Sillin was dealing with the killers, he also took care of her. The girl had grown up very quickly. Back in the Mist Bodhisattva Empire, she used to be very restrained. But now, she was becoming more and more open. She had learned a lot of skills from Shu Sag and Carrie, and every experience was a rare opportunity for her and Tesoro to grow up. Sillin could already imagine what they would be like when they grew up. Bang! 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 Every time a gunshot rang out, an assassin would fall. It might be 1 or 2, or 3, or 4. Yudi and the others weren't the only ones surprised. The killers were just as shocked. It was already shocking enough that they could kill one person with a single gunshot, let alone several. It was a small white gun with a hexagonal muzzle. But to the killers, every gunshot was like a horn calling for their lives. Some assassins wanted to get rid of Celine, the most troublesome opponent, but they realized that they couldn't lock onto Celine at all. They couldn't keep up with Celine's movements either. Celine's speed was too fast, and it was very difficult to make a move on her, be it close combat or ranged combat. Wielding the terrifying white gun in one hand and the thin blade in the other, Celine kept reaping the lives of the killers. It had been almost 3 years since they last saw each other. This was the first time Carrie and the others saw Celine fight after Celine left. Celine's ability had far exceeded their expectations. Such a person actually didn't join the A-team. If he had joined the A-team, he would definitely have a place there. Hui Mao helped left and right, and when he saw that someone was in a difficult situation, he would go over to help. The speed of his claws was not inferior to Celine's, and because his body was small and gray, he didn't even make a sound when he ran. 2 killers were caught off guard by Hui Mao's fatal claws. The number of beasts increased. Not only Celine and the others, but the killers were also affected. Celine took this opportunity to shoot the remaining killers dead. He turned to Hui Mao and said, "Wheeze, clear the way. Retreat." Celine didn't dare to let everyone fly in the air, because he wasn't sure if there were any killers or other hunters around who wanted to harm them. To be on the safe side, it was better to retreat through the forest. A loud cry resounded through the forest. The birds in the sky that were approaching them were so startled that they lost their formation. Some of them even changed directions and flew in different directions. Within the forest, the exotic beasts ahead seemed to have encountered something terrifying. They retreated one after another, opening up a path. Some of the exotic beasts directly fainted from the shockwave. Shusag really wanted to cheer for the kitten that was responsible for all of this. How domineering, he thought to himself. Now that the killers were no longer a threat and the alien beasts were no longer a hindrance, everyone was able to retreat a lot faster. At the same time, the spaceplane was also flying toward them. It wasn't until they entered the spaceplane that everyone relaxed a little. However, they didn't dare to be careless. They weren't out of danger yet. "Moon, Sigma, bring those 2 to me," Celine said through the communicator. After injecting Guidai Shichi and Swallowtail with the antidote, Celine had rushed to Yudi's side instead of guarding them. If he hadn't, the situation would have been completely different. Moon and Sigma had already arrived at where Guidai Shichi and Swallowtail were, so Celine ordered them to bring those 2 to him. Moon and Sigma carried 1 person each and flew toward the spaceplane. Ghost Butterfly 17 and Swallowtail didn't resist either. Their bodies hadn't fully recovered yet, and their best option was to follow Celine's group. At the very least, they would be able to survive. Once everyone was present, the spaceplane flew away from the hunting planet. Carrie and the others couldn't help but feel sorry for the animals that they hadn't killed yet. At this point, Shueqiu had returned to his harmless self and was rolling around with the Miantuan without the slightest hint of nervousness. 2 slow-witted bastards. Only after the spaceplane left the planet and entered the starship did everyone finally relax. The soreness in their muscles intensified. However, Carrie and the others ignored the soreness and ran to the spaceplane's transport container to clean up the meat and the alien beast's horns. Meanwhile, Sigma and Moon went to Swallowtail's little orchard to deal with the seeds. Celine called Yudi and brought Guidai Shichi and Swallowtail to a meeting room on the starship. Celine looked at Guidai Shichi and Swallowtail and asked, "Tell me, which side are they on?" Chapter 326. Hearing Celine's question, Guidai Shichi frowned. "Who?" Silen glanced at the other side. Keep pretending, keep pretending. That earthquake was obviously man-made. We weren't in a seismic zone, but there was an earthquake, and it happened while we were hunting. It was a three-way earthquake, and it forced the beasts to one side. This is a beast horde that wants to kill us, or take advantage of the chaos to kill us. Those killers were provoked by you, weren't they? Guidai Shichi and Swallowtail glanced at each other. They both saw the confusion in each other's eyes. They weren't faking it. They really hadn't expected it. You mean, those people tried to kill you? Guidai Shichi asked tentatively. Seeing the expressions on Guidai Shichi and Swallowtail's faces, Silen and Yudi were also surprised. Yes, they tried to kill us, Silen said with certainty. Could it be that they wanted to kill someone on your team? Guidai Shichi asked again. Silen thinks about the situation. The first to be attacked were Yudi, Carrie, and Xiao Shang. They were all old members of the 6th Division, so it was possible. But... or maybe we were on their hit list. Yudi, who had been silent all this time, finally spoke up. Guidai Shichi and Swallowtail frowned even harder. They had an idea, but they couldn't confirm it. Alright, stop beating around the bush. Who were those killers? Silen asked. Swallowtail looked up at Silen. How do you know they were killers and not other hunters? Professional killers have a different aura than professional hunters. Silen had met many professional killers before, so he was very sensitive to the aura they exuded. That was why he was able to sense the killer's presence. At the time, Yudi and the others were in the forest. If they had flown into the sky, they would have become live targets for the killers. At least they had some cover in the forest. You're right. They're from the Hades organization. On the list of killers, only Pluto likes to assassinate invisibly, Guidai Shichi answered. Pluto. In the Star Alliance's assassin ranking, the Netherworld King assassin organization was ranked in the top 5. Furthermore, its ranking had soared in the past 2 years, and it was even able to charge into the top 3. It was very difficult to estimate the gap between the top 3 assassin organizations. Thus, the Netherworld King could be considered an upstart among the assassin organizations, and its reputation in the Star Alliance was very resounding. Ghost Butterfly 17 continued, Hades has formed an alliance with Heaven's Birth. As you all know, GAL is a place where everyone has to work together to survive. That's why the assassin organizations have started to form alliances. When other hunter groups joined smaller groups, Heaven's Birth, One, Heaven, and God, Heaven's Birth not only recruited smaller hunter groups, but also hooked up with Pluto. That's not the big deal. What's important is that Heaven's Birth and Lan Hudi don't get along. They've already had a few conflicts. At this point, Guidai Shichi helplessly pointed at himself and Swallowtail, who was sitting beside him with a solemn expression. We were originally a small team, but we had a conflict with Heaven's Birth. After Pluto's people joined us, our situation became more and more difficult, so we split up and left. Those killers were probably the group that chased after us. However, after Swallowtail and I left in the aircraft, we found that the aircraft had malfunctioned. We landed on this planet, abandoned the aircraft, and planned to hide and heal while waiting for reinforcements. We didn't expect that there would be so many difficult exotic beasts when we landed, and they made us even more injured. After that, we met your team members. You know what happened next. Lan Hudi's individual strength was strong, but with Heaven's Birth and Pluto working together, it would be difficult for Lan Hudi's small team to resist their combined attack. As for why Pluto's people wanted to kill you, that's what I'm curious about. Their actions showed that they were already going against Lan Hudi, so why would they want to kill you? If you were someone they didn't know, they wouldn't have attacked. But obviously, they must have recognized that you were from Vanguard. They caused the chaos in the beast horde to force us out and kill you at the same time. Offending 2 of the big 4 at the same time, what were they thinking? Were they fearless? I really don't understand. Guidai Shichi spread his hands. Guidai Shichi and Swallowtail didn't understand, and neither did Sillin and Yudi. Although they weren't part of the A-team, they were still the hunters of Vanguard. Pluto's people actually killed them as soon as they arrived, not leaving any room for negotiation. Yudi shuddered at the thought of the situation. If it wasn't for Sillin's appearance, he might have been seriously injured or even gone to see his ancestors. After all, the information he received was too little. Plus, he had left the League of Stars for almost 3 years. Many things had happened in these 3 years, and even now, Sillin couldn't think of a reason. Do you have any information on Fog and Wuxia? Sillin asked. There's nothing we can do. The assassin organizations on the assassin leaderboard are forming alliances, but the 2 giants outside the leaderboard are excluded. Why would they need to form an alliance? Even if they formed an alliance, they would only look for people at the level of Azrael, right? Or directly form an alliance with some of the core members of the Big 4 hunter groups. I can't get any information on people at that level. He wouldn't get as much information as he needed even if he kept asking, so Sillin gestured for the 2 of them to leave. Guidai Shichi stood up and took 2 steps towards the door, then stopped and turned to look at Sillin. I want to ask, are the assassins that Pluto sent after us still in the forest of that hunting planet? Celine looked at him calmly. He's dead. Guidai Shichi and Swallowtail were speechless. In fact, they were prepared to join forces with the reinforcements from Lan Hudi's hunter group to take revenge after receiving news of the assassins that Pluto had sent after them. Who knew that Sillin's words would make them choke on their words? They're all dead. There were at least 30 assassins in the group that came after them, right? I don't know. Sillin thought for a moment. More than 30 died. I don't know if there are any left. Guidai Shichi's face twitched. He turned around and walked out the door. I'll have Whis give you the bill, Sillin added. Guidai Shichi, who had just walked out of the door, stumbled when he heard this. He knew that Sillin wouldn't ask for nothing after bringing them here and injecting them with high-quality medicine. He hated bills the most. How despicable. After Guidai Shichi and Swallowtail left the meeting room, the 2 of them whispered to each other. Why haven't I heard of such a character in Vanguard before? More than 30 assassins from Pluto were all killed, and this group of people didn't seem to be seriously injured. Other than some fatigue, they didn't seem to be injured at all, Swallowtail said. Guidai Shichi was also at a loss. His understanding of the Vanguard B squadrons was limited to a small number of people, and they were all at least at the rank of lieutenant commander. It was a complete coincidence that he had met Sillin back then. As for the people in the B squadrons, he knew even less about them. In Guidai Shichi's mind, the people in the B squadrons didn't need to pay attention to them. But this time, the people in this squad had completely overturned his understanding. What kind of people are they? This kind of combat power was more than enough to occupy a spot in the A squadron. The 2 of them didn't walk far before they saw Shusag squatting in a corner and smoking. Guidai Shichi ran over. Shusag was reflecting on his encounter with the assassins. This was the first time he had encountered a team of assassins other than the one sent by that minor noble family to hunt him down. Moreover, the assassins here were much more difficult to deal with than the ones he had encountered back then. What surprised Shusag the most was that Sillin had told him that these assassins were average at best. If an average assassin was enough to nearly kill him, then what about the stronger assassins Sillin mentioned? Wouldn't he be slaughtered if he ran into them? This won't do. I need to train harder. While Shusag was thinking about how to improve his strength, he saw Guidai Shichi walking toward him. Hey, bro. How many people are in your B squadron? Shusag blew out a ring of smoke. The fact that the kid called him bro instead of uncle made him feel a lot better. Haven't you seen almost all of our team members? Guidai Shichi opened his mouth, but in the end, he let out a dry chuckle and walked toward the lounge Sillin had arranged for them with Swallowtail. Say, Swallowtail, do you think our Lan Hudi is really the strongest among the 4 great hunter regiments? Swallowtail thought for a moment before answering, we used to be. In other words, he wasn't sure now, and he couldn't be sure in the future either. While Guidai Shichi and Swallowtail were surprised to learn that these seemingly unreliable people had slaughtered more than 30 Hades assassins, they also felt relieved. If this squad really was the same size as the other B squadrons in Vanguard, and every member of this squad was as strong as they were, then the 4 Great Hunter Regiments would probably no longer be the 4 Great Hunter Regiments. After Guidai Shichi and Swallowtail left, Sillin and Yudi were exchanging their opinions when Beaver told Sillin that he had received a call from the A Squadron. Sillin told him to transfer the call to them directly. A light screen popped up on the conference table in front of Sillin and Carrie. After the call was transferred, a familiar face appeared on the screen. He wore a big black hat that covered almost half of his face, and the sharp eyes under the hat were always enough to make people stop in their tracks. Senior Songba Leruo, Sillin called out. It was still the same expressionless face, but there was a hint of seriousness in his eyes. Sillin, the main reason I'm contacting you this time is to inform you of one thing. Not long ago, the 7th B Squadron suffered a joint attack from the Heaven's Birth Hunter Regiments and the Hades Assassin Organization. They suffered great losses, and if the 3rd B Squadron hadn't arrived in time to rescue them, the entire 7th B Squadron would have had to rebuild itself. Sillin and Yudi shuddered when they heard this. It was that serious. Normally, a B Squadron would only be brought up when more than half of the B Squadron had died. If that was the case, then the 7th B Squadron had suffered great losses. Right now, the relationship between Heaven's Birth and Vanguard is very tense. You must be careful if you encounter Heaven's Birth. Songba Leruo said. I know. We've actually run into a group of assassins already. Sillin told Songba Leruo about the previous incident. Anyway, you must be careful. The situation is unclear right now, and you can't trust anyone completely. Also, the higher-ups have decided to hold a meeting 50 days from now, and all B Squadron commanders and vice-commanders must attend. Alright, we understand. After the conversation with Songba Leruo, Sillin thought that he could contact Moon, but he discovered that he couldn't get in touch with him at all. They were on the same starship, and yet he couldn't get in touch with Moon at all. After failing to get in touch with Moon, Sillin decided to contact Sigma instead. Right now, Sigma was busy working in its indoor orchard. It had discovered a lot of good seedlings on the hunting planet this time, and it wasn't planning to use genetic engineering to improve them. It preferred naturally occurring species. After Sillin contacted Sigma, the first thing he asked was about the orchard. It was a blessing to be able to eat fresh fruits during a space voyage, and the answer he got from Sigma was very satisfactory. Sigma was indeed skilled. It was only after learning about the orchard that Sillin asked, do you know what happened to you? I can't get in touch with him. Moon said that he's tired and wants to rest. He told us not to disturb him, Sigma replied. Tired? A robot that could work for a long time just by absorbing light energy was saying that he was tired? Bullshit. But before Sillin could ask any further, the light screen on the conference table started flashing. All kinds of data and strings of characters were jumping rapidly, and every electronic device in the conference room started malfunctioning. In the game room on the starship, Tang Qiuqiu was fighting Carrie in a one-on-one shootout, and Xueqiu accidentally bumped into Tang Qiuqiu while playing with Qifeng, causing Tang Qiuqiu to make a serious mistake. Carrie took advantage of the situation and started yelling about turning the tables. Just when Carrie was about to turn the tables, the game system suddenly froze. Carrie was having a great time playing the game, and the spectators were also getting excited. Everyone knew that something like this would happen. At the same time as the conference room Sillin was in, all the electronic devices in the game room started malfunctioning, and the lights in the room started flashing more and more frequently. Everyone's first reaction, shit, the system crashed at this critical moment. Their second reaction, enemy attack. Dias's 2-year-old son, Locke, was rolling around with Xueqiu and the others. When he saw the situation, the little guy's eyes widened in curiosity, and he let out a squeal. Huh? Before he could finish his squeal, Shueqiu grabbed him by the straps on his back and carried him in his arms, just in case something happened and he couldn't react in time. What happened? Enemy attack? Or did we encounter an ion storm? Carrie and the others rushed out of the game room and ran to the command room. Unlike everyone else, Huimao was squatting on the tea table, lazily eating a bag of fish biscuits, oblivious to everything else. Seeing Carrie and the others panic, Huimao only flicked his ears, and continued to lie there calmly eating fish biscuits with squinted eyes. When Carrie rushed to the command room, he saw Sillin coming out of the conference room, but Sillin ignored Carrie and the others. He just told them not to panic and quickly left. What's wrong? Guidai Shichi and Swallowtail asked the others after they came out of the starship due to the various anomalies. They thought that their pursuers had arrived. I don't know, but the captain said not to panic. We should go back to what we were supposed to do, Carrie answered. Ignoring everyone's speculations, Sillin went straight to Moon and Sigma's lounge. He pressed the doorbell, but no response. He pressed the doorbell again, but still no response. What are you doing, Moon? Sillin said in mechanical language. After a long time, the door to the lounge opened. Moon tilted his head and said innocently, I'm thinking. Sillin said. What kind of deep thinking are you thinking about? Sillin didn't finish his sentence. The second half of his sentence was, do you know that half of the starship's instruments and electronic equipment can't be used? Chapter 327. Something was wrong with Moon ever since he returned. Earlier, Sillin hadn't asked him about it because he was busy dealing with Guidai Shichi and Swallowtail. They had only delayed for a short period of time, and in the end, this guy had caused such a situation. For robots like Moon, Sigma, and Cheto, the changes in their consciousness would produce a kind of interference. Normally, they would try to suppress the interference, but it was obvious that Moon was too absorbed in his thoughts to do so. Therefore, the interference started spreading from Moon's room to the rest of the world through the communication network and electrical circuits. That was how the phenomenon he had just seen was caused. It was the same as when Huimao and Sillin passed through the spacetime vortex and released the machine language radiation that caused Sigma's machines to go on strike. Shikai called it machine mind invasion. It was a hurdle that many robot researchers had to face. If they handled it well, they would gain a great deal of help, but if they didn't, they would suffer a backlash. Be it the League of Stars or the Mist Bodhisattva Empire, there had been a lot of robot betrayals that caused a backlash. What's wrong, Moon? Sillin walked into the room, pulled out a chair and sat down across from Moon. Moon lowered his head and twirled his fingers. He looked like he couldn't bring himself to say it. After a long time of dawdling, Sillin finally understood why Moon was throwing a tantrum. Moon had fired a couple of cannons while he and Sigma were searching for the seeds. Now that he thought about it for a moment, he realized that the assassins must have used his cannons to cause a ruckus in the beast hordes and come up with a plan to trigger a three-sided earthquake. That was why Moon felt very guilty. He was the one who didn't think things through. Thankfully, there were no casualties this time, or he would have felt guilty for a very long time. That was why Moon had gone into self-reflection ever since he returned. He was so absorbed in his own self-reflection that he caused a lot of the starship's instruments and electronics to malfunction. Now that he knew that he had caused trouble again, he felt even more ashamed than before. That was why he stood in front of Sillin with his head lowered. Sillin looked at the original robot in front of him. Aside from the fact that it looked like a robot, it had the same personality and thought process as a human. It would be proud, throw a tantrum, and feel guilty. The fact that he felt guilty meant that he actually valued the people in the team very much. He had already approved of the people in the team. Those who were not approved would be separated from his own world, and he wouldn't care whether they lived or died. Sillin was quite pleased to see you like this. At least this was a good sign, wasn't it? Sillin raised his hand and placed it on Moon's round head. He rubbed it like he was rubbing Huimao, feeling the cold, hard metal under his hand. It's not your fault. Even if it wasn't for you, they would still have caused such trouble. You did a good job. When it's time to shock them, you should shock them and teach them a lesson. Otherwise, they'll think that you're easy to bully and become even more aggressive. But those killers still found an opportunity, you said in a low voice. You just happened to be at that point. This is the League of Stars, not the Mist Bodhisattva Empire. Do you know the rules of survival here? Strength reigns supreme. That's right. Strength reigns supreme, even if some things are unavoidable. Even if you hadn't fired the cannons, other hunters would have done the same. Think about it. What would have happened if you hadn't fired the cannons? They will take the initiative to attack, and the commotion caused by their attacks might not be smaller than the commotion caused by your cannons. You thought back to the situation. It was true that he had attacked the hunters hiding in the forest because he sensed that they were up to no good. If he hadn't attacked them, there was no telling what the hunters would have done. So don't think too much into it. Some things are unavoidable, and we can only face them head-on. Sillin didn't say anything more. It would be counterproductive to say too much. Sillin wasn't worried at all. Naturally, he could understand more with Moon's way of thinking. Of course, if it were Sigma, Sillin wouldn't have said all of this. If Sigma was this conflicted, it would probably be the first robot to crash due to depression if he didn't get rid of its guilt. Moon fell silent for a moment. The blue bands on his face flickered as he pondered. He had withdrawn the interference waves, so they weren't affecting him. Sillin wasn't in a hurry. He sat quietly and waited for Moon to come to a decision. 30 minutes later, the blue bands on Moon's face narrowed. Sillin knew that Moon had returned to normal. Go help Sigma organize the seeds. It's busy by itself. Sillin flicked Moon's head with a smile, just like how he flicked Huimao. All right, I'm going. Don't forget to close the door when you leave. Then, Moon flew towards Sigma's indoor orchard. When Sillin came out, he saw Shikai leaning against the wall with a conflicted look on his face. What's wrong? Sillin asked. That little guy actually said hi to me when he flew past. That's strange. He usually ignores me. That's good. Shikai still didn't understand why Moon changed his attitude so quickly. Hey, Sillin, what's going on with Moon? I don't know how Moon's mind works. Don't your family have a lot of records about him? You should know more about him. Shikai curled his lips. It was precisely because of what his ancestors had done that Moon had been wary of him. Most of what he knew about Moon came from Chip. Hey, Sillin, don't go yet. Shikai hurriedly stopped Sillin. I have something to discuss with you. What is it? Sillin stopped and looked at Shikai. About this starship, Yu's incident gave me an idea. Shikai explained his idea to Sillin. Moon's incident had revealed a lot of problems with the starship. Although most starships were like this, it was far from enough for Shikai, who had always had high standards. If Moon had affected the starship's machinery to such an extent just by thinking about it, it would be troublesome if something similar happened again, or if it was the enemy who released the interference. You know that Cheto and Sigma weren't affected at all when the starship's machinery was affected, Sillin. This means that they have a strong defense against this kind of interference. If Cheto and Sigma are exceptions, then take my robots as an example. They were affected by the interference, but it wasn't to a degree where their functions were disabled or their programs messed up. At most, their reactions were slightly delayed. That's all. So, you're saying, I'm saying that we should modify the starship in that direction. Sillin didn't say anything. It wasn't that he didn't agree with Shikai's idea. He was just thinking about the super AI veg fritter he built a long time ago. Back when he was building the veg fritter, he had already thought about modifying the starship in that direction. It was just that he hadn't gotten the chance to do so until now. The 11th Squad's starship wasn't developed in that direction due to the lack of time. Although they hadn't completed a super AI starship, they did leave room for modification in that direction. Right now, the starship could only be considered a normal AI model. It was about the same as Vanguard's other B Squadron star ships, but there was a lot of risk involved in modifying it in that direction. After all, a starship wasn't a flying car that could jump out if something went wrong, but a starship's AI could simply throw them into space and kill them. Shikai understood Silen's concerns, but he really wanted to give it a try. The problem was that not everyone could afford it. Come up with a plan first, and we'll work on it together. Silen included Moon, Sigma, Cheto, and Hui Mao. They were the ones who understood the super AI better than anyone else, so their chances of success would be much higher. Alright, I'll come up with a plan as soon as I can. Shikai was very happy to receive permission. This was going to be a huge challenge. Back then, his ancestors were able to modify Chip into a super AI that could control an electronic star. He was confident that he could do the same thing. Shikai's original plan was to improve the robots, but after encountering Pluto's assassins, he realized that the new batch of robots had many shortcomings. Perhaps it was due to material limitations, but these robots were not like the ones that Black Viper used on missions. Every robot that Black Viper used on missions was expensive, and all the materials were expensive, but at the time, he did not care about money. Things were different now. Shikai had saved a lot of money, and it wasn't obvious under normal circumstances. But when it came to critical moments, its speed, reflexes, and detection abilities weren't up to Shikai's standards. After he returned, he discussed with Cheto how to improve the robots and how to build better robots while lowering the cost. Obviously, this matter had to be delayed. Shikai couldn't care less about anything else until he had the plan to embed the super AI into the starship. When Silen returned to the command center, he was still thinking about how to embed the super AI into the starship. If it succeeded, it would be a great help to him, but if it failed, it would be a bomb that could be placed around him at any time. Silen would rather destroy it than keep it around. Silen suddenly heard a strange sound while he was deep in thought. He turned around and saw the gray cat rubbing its back on the table. The sound was made by the gray cat rubbing its back on the table. Is it because his back is itching? Are you lice? Or are you infected with fleas? You didn't catch those things while you were hunting, did you? Silen walked over and asked. No. Hui Mao twisted his back left and right on the table. His chubby body looked very comical. Come here, let me take a look. Silen beckoned him over. Hui Mao immediately kicked his hind legs and crawled in front of Silen. Silen scooped Hui Mao up and scratched his back a few times. However, Silen immediately noticed a problem. There were two protrusions on Hui Mao's back. They looked like bones, and they were long and oval in shape. Although they weren't very obvious because of the fur covering them, Cheto could still feel them with his touch. What's going on? Silen poked the two protrusions on Hui Mao's back. Yes, that's it. It's really itchy. Hui Mao cried. Carrie was walking past the door with a glass of fruit juice when he saw Hui Mao's reaction. That was why he came over and asked about it. After listening to Silen's explanation, Carrie reached out to feel Hui Mao's back. Feeling the two protrusions, Carrie exclaimed, Huru, you have bone hyperplasia. Slap. As soon as Carrie said this, Tico slapped him on the face. Don't talk nonsense if you don't know anything. That's two different things. Read more medical books and don't make a fool of yourself. Carrie rubbed his head and pursed his lips. He took a step back and let Tico see what was wrong with Hui Mao. After many tests, Tico couldn't figure it out. Although she wasn't a veterinarian, she knew about the health problems of pets because of her rabbit. She really couldn't understand Hui Mao's problem. Every test was very different from that of a normal cat. She didn't know what standard to use to identify it. As for the bones, the two protrusions didn't cause any discomfort to the other bones. It's not itchy anymore. Hui Mao turned over and stood up, shaking his fur. He picked up the unfinished fish biscuits not far away and continued to eat. Could it be because he ate too much? Huru is much fatter than before, Carrie muttered. Sillin shook his head. Let's wait and see. This guy can't be judged by common sense. In fact, the itch on Huimao's back was only intermittent. Apart from the itch, Huimao didn't have any other symptoms. After the itch passed, he would return to normal and was still alive and kicking. He quickly opened the fish biscuits. Sillin had specially prepared a back cushion for Huimao so that it didn't need to lie down when it wanted to rub against the cushion. However, Huimao's appetite had increased a lot recently and he ate almost non-stop. The results of the hunting on the hunting planet had been checked. Sillin wanted to sell them for some supplies first instead of saving all the money. In such a chaotic situation, it was only reliable to exchange money for supplies. Otherwise, in a crisis, they might not be able to get what they wanted even if they had the money. Diaz and the others knew the contact information of some of their old customers. They used to sell their items to them after hunting. These people specialized in purchasing items in the hunting star zone, and their prices were fair. Many hunter regiments liked to trade with them. After contacting the buyer and the trading location, Sillin told Guidai Shichi to contact Lan Hudi's people to pick him up at the location. Remember to return the money by the way, said Huimao, who was lying on the ground eating a fish biscuit. Guidai Shichi threw a nut at him. Eat your biscuit, fatty. The trading planet was a relatively remote area in the entire hunting star zone, but it was in such an area that almost 60% of the goods in the hunting star zone were traded from here. The people who came to deliver the goods were undoubtedly not large hunter groups. Since the chaos of the League of Stars began, this place was obviously much quieter. There were only a few starships and spaceships docked at the spaceport outside the planet. There are no starships from Heaven's birth. Should we dock the starship at the spaceport or park it somewhere else invisibly? Carrie asked. Invisibly. We'll take the spaceship over to do the trade, said Sillin. After finding a place to hide the starship, Sillin and the others split into 3 groups and took the spaceship to the trading planet. Because they had informed in advance, Sillin and the others flew directly to the trading location. It was a vast manor, with tamed exotic beasts in the surroundings. The exotic beasts that people spent so much effort to tame all had their own selling points. Those people were just maximizing their value. There was no need to take the initiative to contact them. There were already people coming out from the manor to meet them. Sillin left this series of matters to Diaz. After all, he was a veteran and familiar with the other party. While the other party was inspecting the goods, Sillin looked at the surrounding scenery. There were some buildings and breeding grounds for exotic beasts on the vast grassland that was filled with the scent of grass. The exotic beasts that were once fierce on the hunting star were now leisurely strolling on the grass, enjoying a comfortable life. Sillin felt that they were a group of hedgehogs that had been plucked out of their quills. Huimao, Shueqiu, and the others were rolling on the grass. Tico put the little rabbit down to eat the grass. The quality of the grass here was very good, fresh and not contaminated by drugs. Sillin was looking at it when he suddenly noticed people walking out of a building in the distance. Although they were quite far away, Sillin could still see them clearly without the help of any tools. The bodyguards were protecting 2 young men, and one of them was someone Sillin had met once before, Fenuzwa. Behind Fenuzwa was the famous business-related media giant of the League of Stars, Lux, which had over 80 contribution points. Since they mainly reported on the business sector, Sillin had only met him once at a small gathering held by Lung when God's Back Garden, at the center of Sector Z, was first opened by the military. However, Fenuzwa probably wouldn't be able to recognize Sillin even if he stood in front of Sillin. After all, they had only met once, and Sillin had changed his appearance. Moreover, it was Lung who had pulled the strings for him. Fenuzwa probably didn't think much of Sillin at the time. However, with Fenuzwa's identity as the young master of Lux, he chatted happily with the person next to him without putting on any airs of superiority. Sillin knew that this wasn't to say that Fenuzwa didn't put on airs. If it was someone of lower status, Fan Yuzhuo would definitely put on airs. However, the fact that he didn't put on such an attitude meant that the other person's background was pretty big. The young man gave Silen a sense of familiarity even though he had never seen him before. The young man looked a little thin and weak, and Silen could tell from his walking movements that he wasn't very strong. The young man's bodyguards were all experts, and no matter where the young man went, the bodyguards would always be able to protect him from the best angle possible. The young man wasn't very strong, but his senses were very sharp. When he noticed that someone was staring at him, he looked towards Silen. However, he moved his gaze away after a single glance. The bodyguards around him were very wary of Silen, and they were paying attention to Silen's situation at all times. Strange, have I really never seen that person before? Why does he feel so familiar? It was at this moment he heard Yudi shout. Silen shook his head and walked towards the direction. However, he had only taken 2 steps when Silen suddenly paused and widened his eyes. That person. Chapter 328. Silen. It's Silen. Yudi waved his hand in front of Silen's eyes when he noticed that Silen wasn't responding to him. What is it? Silen asked, but his eyes were focused on the people standing in front of the building. Do you know them? Yudi asked. Silen shook his head. I only know one of them. I don't know the other. Do you know who the man in the brown windbreaker is? I don't know. I've never seen him before. Who's the guy next to him? The young master of lavish, Fan Yuzhuo. Oh, a rich young master. He's rich. Speaking of which, a man who can chat so happily with the young master can't be simple, can he? Silen shot a glance at the tamed alien beasts rolling around on the grass and teasing them. He shook his head and decided not to count on them. Cheto, help me investigate that man, Silen said to Cheto in secret. The reason why Silen found the man familiar wasn't because he had seen him before. It was because the man's facial features reminded Silen of Genya. It made Silen think that he was Genya. Silen had seen Genya's image when he was young back at the Gen family's residence. Genya at the time looked a little like this man. There were a lot of people in the League of Stars who looked exactly the same as Genya. Although the man didn't look very similar to Genya, and even if they were related by blood, Silen felt that there was something special about him. Silen believed that it wasn't an illusion or a misreading of his face. It was because of Silen's intuition, and Silen always trusted his intuition. Silen would find a way to obtain the man's DNA for verification. If Silen was right, then he would be able to deliver Genya's item to the League of Stars very soon. Fan Yuzhuo asked the person next to him, Xingfu, do you know that guy? The man called Xingfu looked at Silen's direction and said, how the hell would I know them? You know that I've never left Sector S before, and I'm surrounded by bodyguards all the time. I don't even have any privacy. That's strange. Fan Yuzhuo took the warm tea from the servant and called over a bodyguard behind him. Investigate the people over there. Yes. After receiving the order, the bodyguard silently retreated. Fan Yuzhuo usually drank wine. In Fan Yuzhuo's knowledge, this kind of warm tea had always been liked by middle-aged and elderly people, so Fan Yuzhuo disdained to touch this thing. However, the person beside him was a little special, so Fan Yuzhuo drank with him. He even put on a satisfied expression as if he was tasting the tea. Come on, if you don't want to drink this, then don't. Xingfu took another cup of tea from the servant and took a sip with a frown. Then, he said, if it wasn't for my constitution, I wouldn't have fucking drunk this thing. Ahem, did your father forbid you from undergoing surgery and genetic medicine? Fan Yuzhuo asked curiously. Considering their background and wealth, there was no way they couldn't even perform a simple surgery. Besides, even if Xingfu's genes were crap, they shouldn't be so crap that he couldn't even endure a surgery, right? Xingfu shot him a glance and said, my grandmother forbade it. Realization dawned on Fan Yuzhuo. Ah, so it's the queen's decision. No wonder. If it wasn't for my grandmother, we would have been like everyone else a long time ago. At the very least, we'd be able to run and fight like a normal person, instead of doing girly things all day long like a cripple. They're drinking wine, and we're drinking warm tea, no less. Aren't they afraid that I'll go soft from drinking this thing? The bodyguards behind Xingfu looked like they were deaf, and they couldn't help but feel embarrassed. One of them, who was probably the head of the bodyguards, cleared his throat and reminded his young master of the situation. However, the young master pretended not to notice and continued venting his dissatisfaction. What do you think happened? My grandmother is a domineering person. She's resourceful and bold, or she wouldn't have been called the queen. Why would she allow us to be trash like this? Xingfu continued. Fen Yuzhua hurriedly covered it up with the excuse of drinking tea. The man could criticize the queen, but he didn't dare. Setting aside whether the queen would do anything about it, his old man wouldn't let him off the hook for sure. Why didn't she call him Her Majesty instead of Her Majesty? It was because the queen was just a title someone else had given her. There might be a lot of people in the League of Stars who hadn't heard of the name Queen before, but ever since the chaos began, more and more people had learned of the name. Everyone knew that the Queen referred to the one in Sector S. She was the leader of one of the three great forces of Sector S, Golden Beginning, and the Queen Xin Engenia. Ever since the League of Stars chaos ended, a power struggle had broken out in Sector S, and in the end, only three great forces were left: Flying Snake, Fire Phoenix, and Golden Beginning. Queen Xin Engenia was the ruler of Golden Beginning. Fen Yuzhua wouldn't have cared so much about Xingfu's feelings if he was just the grandson of the queen of Sector S. Some of Fen Yuzhua's friends were dissatisfied with Xingfu's politeness, but Fen Yuzhua simply smiled and said nothing. Everyone knew that Xingfu was the queen's grandson, but there was one thing they didn't know. Xingfu's aunt was Xin Prisa, the only huntress of the 6 stars of Hunt. Every star-rank hunter had powerful connections, and even Osculos, the loneliest of them all, had a lot of forces behind him. That was why his death caused such a huge commotion. Xin Prisa had connections with the military, the government, the hunter regiments, and some of the big families. Her connections were something that Fen Yuzhua had to be wary of. It was why Fen Yuzhua had always been so considerate of Xingfu. Xingfu was still complaining to himself and ignoring the awkwardness of the people around him. It wasn't a good thing to listen to the queen speak ill of him, and there was no telling when trouble would come knocking on his door. While Fen Yuzhua was trying to figure out how to respond, the bodyguard he had ordered to investigate Silan's group walked up to him quietly. "Young master, those people are hunters from Vanguard's 11th B Squadron. They're here to trade their goods." Vanguard? 11th B Squadron? Xingfu wasn't the one who asked the question, but Fen Yuzhua himself. He might not be strong, but his hearing was pretty good, and Fen Yuzhua wasn't planning to hide anything from him. The bodyguard didn't lower his voice, so Xingfu heard everything the bodyguard said. Although he wasn't familiar with the situation outside of Sector S, Xingfu still knew some basic information about the 4 great hunter regiments. He knew that Vanguard had 10 B squadrons, but since when did they have an 11th B squadron? Fen Yuzhua had the same question on his mind, so the bodyguard hurriedly explained, "It's a new group, so there aren't many of them." Seeing that the bodyguard was hesitant to speak, Fen Yuzhua got angry. "If you have something to say, just say it." "Well, I've looked into it. The person who received the goods gave me a list of the members of the 11th Division. Among them, is the name young Master Lung is looking for." Cough cough. Cough cough cough. Fen Yuzhua was so agitated that he choked and his face turned red. Xingfu patted Fen Yuzhua's back. "Calm down, calm down. Calm my ass." Fen Yuzhua roared in his heart. "You're talking about, ahem. Silan?" Fen Yuzhua asked hurriedly. The bodyguard nodded. "I've checked on the other members of the 11th Division. Quite a few of them used to be from the 6th Division, but the problem is that Silan doesn't look like what Lung showed us. After catching his breath, Fan Yuzhua took a few deep breaths and turned to look at Silen's group. However, Silen had already been dragged away by Yudi to discuss the deal, so Fan Yuzhua couldn't see Silen's figure from where he was. Not long after the League of Stars descended into chaos, young Master Lung contacted a few of his friends in various fields to search for the person named Silen. However, there had been no news since then. Not even Vanguard's 6th Division members knew about it. How could Fan Yuzhua not be excited when he suddenly heard news about Silen? It wasn't because he was close to Silen, but because of young Master Lung. If this matter was confirmed, Fan Yuzhua was certain that young Master Lung would help him solve the difficult test his father gave him not long ago. "Young Master, should we continue the investigation?" the bodyguard asked. "Of course. It's most likely him. Should we contact young Master Lung then?" "Not right now. Let's wait until I confirm it. Have the person in charge of the goods stall them." "Understood." Fan Yuzhua suddenly remembered something and called out to the bodyguard who was about to leave. "See if the cat young Master Lung mentioned is here. If it's here, then it's Silen." "Got it." After the bodyguard left, Fan Yuzhua finally remembered that he had been too focused on Silen and neglected Xingfu. He was about to apologize when Xingfu spoke up first. "Silen. That name sounds familiar. I think I've heard it somewhere before." Fan Yuzhua thought for a moment and smiled. "Oh, I forgot to tell you. Silen is acquainted with Fire Phoenix's Pianhua and Flying Snake's Zijiu. Did you hear it from one of them?" "No wonder." Xingfu clapped his hands. "I was wondering why it sounded so familiar. I heard Pianhua and Zijiu talking about him before. Is he acquainted with young Master Lung too?" "I wouldn't have noticed if you didn't mention it, but he seems to be acquainted with a lot of people." Fan Yuzhua was surprised. Silen wasn't the kind of person who would take the initiative to befriend people, and he wasn't exactly friendly either. However, he was acquainted with a lot of people. He had learned a few things about Silen from Lung. It wasn't everything, but it was enough to surprise anyone. "Then I'll have to meet him. It's not every day that I'm out here, so it's good to make some friends." Xingfu's depression from his constitution was mostly dispelled. "But I have to remind you that Silen is a member of Vanguard right now. I don't think Golden Beginning is on good terms with Vanguard, is it?" Fan Yuzhua asked. Xingfu didn't mind. "That's different. I'm here to meet Silen, not Vanguard. Plus, a newly formed squad isn't going to affect Vanguard as a whole, is it?" Fan Yuzhua thought, "I can't say for sure." Silen received a message from Cheto right after the deal was concluded. The man was indeed from Sector S, and his name was Xingfu. Xing. All 3 Zhen Xingming brothers had the word Xing in their names. Was it a coincidence? Cheto couldn't get his hands on Xingfu's DNA because the bodyguards were too well protected and cautious. While Silen was thinking of a way to get his hands on Xingfu's DNA as soon as possible, he turned around and saw Fan Yuzhua walking towards him with a smile on his face. Xingfu was with him. Fan Yuzhua and Xingfu walked over with their bodyguards behind them. The 11th Squad's members were all looking at them warily as they made their way over to the main hall. "Is that you, Silen?" Fan Yuzhua asked before he even got close to Cheto. The moment Fan Yuzhua said this, Silen knew that Fan Yuzhua definitely knew. Silen didn't bother to hide it either. He walked up to Fan Yuzhua and greeted him, "Long time no see, Fan Yuzhua. It really is you. What happened to you, kid?" "It's a long story." "What are you doing here?" Silen asked. "I'm here to see if there are any tamed alien beasts I can bring over to the 11th Squad." "I'm also here for a stroll," Fan Yuzhua replied. He was here mainly to keep Xingfu company. He could have just sent someone to do the job himself otherwise. Silen smiled and looked at Xingfu next to Fan Yuzhua. "Oh, allow me to introduce you. This is Xingfu." Fan Yuzhua didn't bother to introduce him. "Hello, nice to meet you." I've heard about you from Pianhua and Sijiu, Xingfu said. Silen and Xingfu had become a lot more familiar with each other after Fan Yuzhua mentioned Pianhua and the flying snake Zijiu. However, the bodyguards around Xingfu would raise their guard every time Silen tried to get close to Xingfu, and Xingfu didn't object to it at all. Oh right, Silen. Why don't you contact young Master Lung right now? He's been looking for you. Fan Yuzhua had one of his subordinates bring him the communicator Lung had given him. The Andryara family had their own communication network, and this place was the Andryara family's property. It was just that not many people knew about it. When Lung received Fan Yuzhua's message, he was wearing his precious slippers and sleeping on a shell bed that was even bigger than the one Silen had seen before. I'll give you 10 seconds. Lung yawned without even opening his eyes. Young master, I'll let Silen talk to you directly. Fine, then tell him to, fuck. Who did you say just now? Lung immediately sobered up, straightened his body, and rolled down from his bed of shells. Fan Yuzhua didn't answer. He passed the communicator to Silen so that Silen could talk to Lung. You sure have unique taste. Silen said while looking at the shell bed on the communicator. Lung crawled to his feet in a hurry. When he saw Silen on the communicator, his face twisted for a moment before he squeezed out a few words, fuck you. It's been a few years since we last met, and this is what you say? Why did you change your appearance again? Pretending to be dead again? This is my original appearance. I didn't pretend to be dead this time. I really had some business to attend to before I left. Now that I'm back, I've just established a new B squadron, Vanguard's 11th B squadron. You can invest a little when the time comes. Lung was silent for a few seconds before he said, I'll fuck you again. Behind Lung, the little old man Berzet reminded, young master, please pay attention to your etiquette. When he heard Berzet's words, Lung paused for a moment before he abruptly ran towards the small study. After he entered, he pulled the door shut behind him and shut Berzet outside. That little old man is too annoying. Let's continue. After Silen chatted with Lung for a while, Lung said, where's Wheeze, Silen? Call it over and talk to Lord Cat. I got a lot of good cat breeds this time. Let's see if there's any that Lord Cat likes. Silen. Lung wanted to talk to Wheeze, so Silen went to the grassland to look for Huimao. Huimao wasn't playing with Shueqiu and the others right now. Wheeze said it was sleepy just now, so it left, Shueqiu said. I'll go look for it. You guys keep playing. Don't scare those alien beasts too much. Why is that alien beast bald? Shueqiu, Miantuan, Qifeng, Moon and Sigma who came to play on a whim turned their heads away in unison and avoided answering. Never mind. Let them do whatever they want. Silen sensed Wheeze's general location for a moment, and Cheto sent him a message while he was walking in that direction. I've got his DNA, and it's just as you thought. They're related by blood, and if I'm not mistaken, they're grandfather and grandson, Cheto said. I knew it. Silen had been thinking about visiting Sector S to search for Jenya's logbook and the person Jenya mentioned, but he didn't expect to run into Xingfu here. Xingfu's full name was probably Zhen Xingfu. Xingfu also mentioned that he had a younger sister called Xingji. Perhaps only a few people would know the true meaning of Foggy's name. Cheto continued, however, there's something wrong with his DNA. Unlike a normal person's DNA, his DNA is too muted for too long. It's a flaw that makes him look thin and weak. Silen understood Xingfu's condition. The Zhen family's DNA was different from the others. Most of the Zhen family's DNA was muted, and the natural plant hormones extracted from the Fuji tree would cause their DNA to change. The Zhen family would inject a portion of the DNA into their DNA at birth, and then another half at adulthood to trigger a change in their DNA and remove the muted state. The DNA was unique to the Zhen family's DNA, and Jenya didn't have the time to inject the other half of the DNA into his body. That was why his DNA was so flawed and aged so quickly. Clearly, Xingfu was in the same situation. That being said, Xingfu didn't even inject the DNA when he was born. No wonder he looked thin and weak. Silen wondered how Xingfu's father, Genya's son, was doing. Silen thought about how he should tell Xingfu about Genya as he walked toward Huimao. On a grassy field not far away from where the alien beasts were kept, Huimao was lying on its side with its belly facing Silen. It was enjoying the warm sunlight and sleeping soundly, its paws still clutching a bag of fish biscuits. Huimao's ears twitched a little when he heard the familiar footsteps. Then, he went back to sleep. Maybe it was because its consciousness had sensed Silen's approach, but Huimao rolled on its stomach and rubbed its body against the grass. Silen was just about to tell Huimao that Lung wanted to talk to him when he suddenly paused and looked at Huimao with a strange expression. "Wheeze, what's that behind you?" Chapter 329. Upon hearing Silen's words, the gray cat lazily half-opened its eyes and let out a slow yawn. "What did you say?" Silen pointed at Huimao's back. "What's that thing on your back?" "My back." Huimao suddenly felt an itch on its back, so it cocked its head and raised one of its hind legs to scratch it. The moment it did, however, it realized something was wrong. Thus, on the vast grassland, the sound of a cat's meow suddenly spread out with a different tone. The tamed beasts that had just calmed down were thrown into chaos once more. "What's wrong? What's wrong?" Carrie and the others searched for Huimao everywhere they went. They were all very familiar with the cat's meow. Meanwhile, Xingfu's bodyguards quickly formed a defensive formation the moment the cat's meow rang out. It was a conditioned reflex. There were two gray things growing out of Huimao's back. He didn't know what they were, but when Huimao woke up, the two gray things slowly unfurled and grew wider and wider. Wings? Silen couldn't help but wonder. Who would have thought that the cat's words would come true? But Silen stared at Huimao's round body. Can it really fly? The wings were shaped like wings, but they weren't made of feathers. Instead, they were made of the same ugly gray fur as Huimao's body. Huimao extended its wings a little more, so that it could wrap itself around its body several times. Huimao rubbed its wings with its paw and grinned like an idiot. It didn't even care about the bag of fish biscuits anymore. "How did you grow wings?" Silen asked. "I wanted them to grow, so I did." Huimao bounced around like it was showing off, flapping its new wings loudly. It didn't know why, but it kept dreaming of a pair of wings, and that's how it grew them. Huimao wondered when its next dream of eating fish biscuits from a starship would come true. "Fly around and get used to your new wings," Silen said. "All right." Huimao shook its feathers, raised its head, straightened its tail, and flapped its wings. "Shake again. Shake again." 2 minutes later, Silen looked at Huimao, whose forepaws were still on the ground, and could not help but say, "You're flapping your wings, not riding a bicycle. It would be strange if you could fly with your wings out of sync." In order to stop Huimao's uncoordinated vibrations, Silen squatted in front of Huimao and raised his hand. "Look at my hand. Flap your wings according to my gesture. Come, up, down, up, down." Huimao also knew that he had to coordinate the two wings, but it wasn't easy to control them. It tried its best to make the two wings vibrate according to Silen's gestures. After a long time, the two wings were finally able to synchronize, and its plump body gradually left the ground. Meow meow meow, Silen couldn't help but give the gray cat a reminder when he saw that it was getting carried away while flying in irregular arcs. Focus. Huimao was indeed getting carried away. After flying in the air, it wanted to show off to Shueqiu and the others. Just as it was flying towards where Carrie and the others were, a gust of wind suddenly blew and disrupted Huimao's rhythm. Plus, it was not familiar with controlling its wings, so it fell from the sky and knocked out an exotic beast that was dozing off and could not dodge in time. The group of exotic beasts looked at their companion, who was lying on the ground for a long time, and immediately classified Huimao as highly dangerous. Therefore, as soon as they saw a suspicious figure in the air, the exotic beasts would run away as if they were avoiding their natural enemy. Fortunately, the place was big enough, or else they would be in trouble. What? What is that? Carrie asked Yudi, dumbfounded, as he looked at the familiar-looking fellow that flew out from the chaotic group of exotic beasts. It's a snore. Cats don't have wings, right? Normally, yes. But that fat cat doesn't belong to the normal category. TSK. Other people fly like eagles, but this one? From afar, I thought that it was a wild duck at first glance, but when I looked closer, oh my, it's a fat one. Carrie pointed at the gray cat flying leisurely in the air not far away and said with a smile. I'm afraid we'll have a lot of trouble in the future. Yudi sighed. Carrie couldn't agree more. Since Huimao could fly now, Moon and Sigma flew up to play with Huimao and help Huimao familiarize itself with its wings. While watching Huimao, Moon, and Sigma fly in the air, Shueqiu squatted next to the fence and bit its paws. Tang Qiuqiu couldn't stand it anymore and tossed it a hoverboard. See? That cat doesn't have time to talk to you right now, Silan said to Lung on his communicator. Lung also saw the blurry figure in the sky and became excited when he learned that Huimao had just grown a pair of wings. Quick, call Grandpa Cat over. I've never seen a cat with wings before. Silan called Huimao over to greet Lung, and Huimao did come over. But after a brief greeting, he flew back to chase after the bird with Moon. They were obviously fast enough to catch up to the bird, but they just had to stay 10 centimeters behind it and scratch it with their claws from time to time, scaring the bird so much that it kept chirping away. Ha, it looks like the good breeds I got aren't going to work. Let me see if I can find a female cat with wings, Lung said in a serious tone. Are you free right now? You still have the time to care about something like this? Silan said. Of course not. Lai Long grumbled at the mention of this topic, but he glanced at where Silan was and winked at him. Let's talk somewhere else. This was the Andryra family's property after all, so it was easy for him to order people around. Lung asked someone to arrange a room for Silan. Whatever they were going to talk about was not to be leaked out. Xingfu made up his mind when he saw one of the managers respectfully ushering Silan into the building. It was obvious that Silan was much more important to Lung than Fenuzwa, so Xingfu was trying to figure out a way to build a good relationship with Silan. He didn't want to rely on his grandmother and aunt for protection, not to mention that his grandmother and aunt weren't in a good position right now. He shouldn't trouble them with everything, so he needed to establish his own network of connections. After Silan entered the room that was decorated to look like a study, he inspected his surroundings. The protection measures in this room were indeed very good. Silan, isn't the situation in the Hunter Alliance a little unstable right now? Lung asked. Yeah. The conflict between the four great forces is growing more and more intense, and Vanguard and Heaven's Birth are probably going to fight each other very soon. How are you guys doing? What else can we do in this situation? No one can rest easy. Lung's expression turned serious. Something happened in the army. Outsiders only know that the 8 marshals are in power, but there's one thing they haven't told anyone. Only 3 of the 4 Heavenly Edict generals are still alive. Silan was truly shocked. That was a Heavenly Edict warrior they were talking about. Setting aside the fact that they weren't surrounded by guards, they were incredibly strong themselves. Killing a Heavenly Edict warrior was no easy feat. For example, when Silan killed Osculos, it was all thanks to a combination of factors that Silan seized the opportunity to do so. Strictly speaking, Silan wasn't the only one who killed Osculos. Huimao and Cheto had contributed as well. Do you know who killed that Heavenly Edict warrior? Lung asked mysteriously. Who? Si Huang. Who was Si Huang? Silan was puzzled. Oh, maybe you don't know this yet, but he's pretty low-key. Si Huang, it's Azrael's. Lung gave Cheto a thumbs up. That guy killed a Heavenly Edict warrior the moment he did. The balance in the army has been messed up a long time ago. The 8 marshals are in power, and the Ci family and the Yu family are the strongest among them because they both have a heavenly edict warrior. As for the last heavenly edict warrior, he's keeping a low profile because no one from his family is among the 8 marshals. His actual military power isn't as strong as the 8 marshals, but he does have a lot of other non-military forces under his command. He's actively avoiding the Ci and Yu families. He's a smart man. The Ci family was Ci Jincheng's family, and the Yu family was Yu Linglong's family. Be it the military, the government, the business world, or the academic world, these 2 families had powerful connections and networks. Add to that the fact that they had a heavenly edict warrior in their ranks, there was no doubt that they were powerful. The heavenly edict warrior's presence wasn't just because he was powerful, but also because of his connections and deterrence. This was the only way the heavenly edict warrior could gather more forces for their own use. It was no wonder that the 3rd heavenly edict warrior was avoiding them. Silan, the military and the government are now divided into 8 factions. The relationships between them are complicated, so you hunters shouldn't get involved. Even if others want to get involved, don't join them. They're just cannon fodder. The power of the army is far greater than people can imagine. This is what Ci Jincheng and Knight told me as well. They told me to tell you in passing. I understand. I have a lot of things to do, and our new team doesn't have many members, so we'll do what we can. Lung and Silan's conversation only lasted for an hour, but the amount of information Silan had gathered was enough for him to investigate for a long time. There were some things that Silan wouldn't have access to in such a short period of time. As expected of the Andryara family, they had a lot of information at their fingertips. Silan believed that Ji Feng knew about these things as well, but Ji Feng wouldn't tell him. Ji Feng probably didn't think that Silan would learn these secrets from Lung either. Silan, be careful of the Yu family. Don't get involved. Yu Linglong might not attack you, but the rest of the Yu family might not. This was the last thing Lung said to Silan before he ended the call. Silan knew that there were many things that Lung hadn't told him, but he could guess a few things from what he said. What a chaotic era. After the call ended, Silan stayed in his room and pondered quietly for a moment, sorting out the information he had received. Azrael, Si Huang. As expected, they were both unfathomable people. Azrael's men didn't come looking for him, but Silan didn't think that Azrael's men and Gaydar didn't know about his return. They were probably preparing to deal with the League of Stars first before coming looking for Silan. They didn't think that Silan could do well in a foreign galaxy in just 2 to 3 years. Just as Silan thought, the reason Azrael's men didn't spread the news of Silan's return was because they wanted to deal with the League of Stars first. After Si Huang killed the Tian Zhao warrior, Azrael had a lot of trouble to deal with. Every Tian Zhao warrior was related to many people, and Azrael had to deal with these people first. Currently, Gaydar wasn't with Azrael's men. There was a rumor among the hunters that Gaydar would be the new solo hunter after Osculos, becoming one of the 6 stars of hunting. The military was a mess, but how much better were the hunters? When Silan went out, Huimao was holding a mole in his hands. When it saw Silan, Huimao flapped its wings and flew over. Now that Huimao was familiar with using its wings, its flight was a lot more stable. Based on Silan's understanding of Huimao, the cat was sometimes even better at playing dumb than Moon. No one would have guessed that the cat was actually listening to Silan Halong's secret conversation while it was flying. Are you done eavesdropping? Don't tell anyone. Don't tell anyone. Silan looked at the gray cat. Whis tossed the listless animal to the side of the grassland. After the animal regained its freedom, it immediately changed its listless appearance and began to dig a hole with its claws. In the blink of an eye, it had burrowed into the ground and disappeared. Is there a lot of trouble here? But I don't think there's anything to worry about. Worst comes to worst, we can just bring our people to Master Second Grandpa. It was getting better and better at calling him Master Second Grandpa. Silan smiled but didn't say anything. It wasn't easy to run away from a giant whirlpool like this. But it was also an opportunity for the 11th squad to grow stronger. Heroes are born in troubled times, and I bet there would be a lot of good seedlings in this chaotic environment. Right now, Silen was looking at Xingfu's direction. It would be a lot easier to get to Sector S with Xingfu leading the way, and Silen would be able to find the notebook Genya mentioned as soon as possible. Then, he could take it to the Queen. He would have a great help when the time came. Without the notebook as proof, Silen wasn't stupid enough to run to the Queen and say anything. After asking Xingfu about their next plans and learning that they were returning to Sector S soon, Silen expressed his desire to travel with them. He didn't go into detail about his true goal, and only said that he was going to meet a friend at Sector S. Xingfu was very welcoming of Silen's company. Now it was a three-way trip. Silen, Xingfu, and Fen Yuzhua. There were only a dozen or so Lanhuti people who came to pick up Guidai Shichi and Swallowtail, but every one of them was an elite. When they learned that Silen's group had saved Guidai Shichi and Swallowtail, they thanked them sincerely. However, Huimao flew up to them right after they thanked them, and they looked like they had just drunk a bucket of bitter melon juice with chili. After the matter with Guidai Shichi and Swallowtail was taken care of, Silen, Xingfu, and the others departed for Sector S. On the starship, Silen, Shikai, Cheto, and the others were researching how to embed the AI into the starship. Carrie couldn't help them at all, so he stayed in the command room alone and munched on nuts. The door to the command room was open, and Carrie could see the few guys outside the door flying around the passageway playing games. Ever since Huimao grew wings, they had changed their playing field from the ground to the sky. Inside the starship's passageway were Huimao, Moon, Sigma, Shueqiu, and the Miantuan hopping between the four of them. These guys were always making a ruckus. Huimao generously took out his snakeskin ball. At first, Shueqiu and the Miantuan were a little afraid of the snakeskin ball, but they soon grew numb to it. One of their nerves was just too thick. For Huimao, the biggest advantage of growing wings was that it could eat while flying. Without wings, he would have to stop eating. He could only continue after he finished eating. But now, Huimao was flapping its wings and munching on a bag of dried fruits. Everywhere it flew, there were food crumbs on the floor. The more Carrie looked outside, the deeper his frown became. The bag of dried fruits Huimao was holding looked very familiar. Crack! Carrie crushed the bag in his hand. You little bastards have raided my cabinet again. Shueqiu and the Miantuan heard Carrie's roar and ran away. Wheeze wasn't afraid of Carrie though. It leisurely flew to the door and cast a glance at Carrie. There are only 7 bags of dried fruits and 3 cans of food. We haven't even pried open that big cabinet of yours yet. Also, the dried fruits don't taste good. Fish biscuits are better. You think you're in the right? Carrie looked at Huimao. Don't go too far. Huimao ignored him and continued to gnaw on the dried fruits. It crunched loudly and the crumbs fell all over the floor. Carrie pointed at the crumbs on the floor. Look at the crumbs on the floor. They're everywhere. Do you have any civility? Huimao raised its fat paw and picked up a piece of dried fruit from the bag. What is civility? Carrie was speechless. Carrie grabbed a handful of nuts and threw them at Huimao. Huimao flapped its wings and did 2 backflips to dodge the hidden weapons thrown at it. It said to Carrie, so lame. This cat could always move at a speed that didn't match its size. I'm telling you, Huolu, don't be too proud of yourself as a cat. Huimao bared its fangs and flapped its wings. Before it could reply, Silen grabbed its wings and pulled it over like a chicken. Silen pointed at the food crumbs on the floor and said to Huimao, I'll give you 3 hours to clean up the place where you dropped the crumbs. Don't we have cleaning robots? The starship even has a self-cleaning system. Huimao retorted. Then I'll deduct your cat food. You're on a diet anyway. Huimao's ears drooped. Fine. Carrie was just about to gloat when he noticed a notification on the monitor. A starship is coming. They even have a corvette. Which family's benefactor is this? Carrie asked. The starship wasn't looking for Silan's group. Instead, it was looking for Xingfu and Fen Yuzhua. Silan learned from Xingfu that it was the young master of the League of Stars, Peneus, who had over 80 contribution points. He was a media magnate in the media industry, Limitless, and Silan met him at a gathering in Lung. Fen Yuzhua was also on the starship that Peneus had entered Xingfu with him. Xingfu was very happy to see Peneus. What's the good stuff this time? Peneus had a lot of video recordings of exciting games, and Xingfu liked them very much. Ever since he got to know Xingfu and Xingfu, Peneus would always show Xingfu and Fen Yuzhua some of his favorite videos. This time was no different. Even Peneus couldn't sit still when he learned that Fen Yuzhua and Xingfu had come to Hunting Planet together. He came to them with a video he just obtained. It's the best this time. Super awesome. Peneus waved a small storage device in his hand. Come on, let's go take a look. Xingfu hurriedly dragged Peneus and Fen Yuzhua to the specially remodeled recording room. The bodyguards were used to this kind of thing by now, so they didn't mind it at all. If they pestered Xingfu too much, it would only anger him. Only 2 bodyguards followed them into the recording room and stood at the entrance. Due to his physical condition, Xingfu couldn't use a lot of powerful guns that required a lot of control, so he could only find comfort in the game. The bodyguards could understand. This video hasn't been released to the public yet. Even if it is, it'll cost a lot of money to watch. It's worth it. Peneus happily connected the storage device to the projector, and the entire recording room was instantly filled with the video of the battle. Xingfu stared longingly at the scene in front of him. He could almost feel the hard metal of the guns and the sparks that sprayed out of them. He could see many nimble figures dashing through the smoke-filled battlefield one after another. Explosions erupted one after the other. It looked as if he could touch it, but when he reached it, it was nothing more than an illusion. It was just like his own unattainable dream. Xingfu loved to stand in this kind of video. Even if he knew it was just an illusion and a screenshot of a battle, it was still an addictive and sad experience for him. Xingfu unwittingly became immersed in the scene as he stared at the video. No one else in the recording room noticed that Xingfu's pupils were acting strangely. The rate at which they contracted and expanded gradually synchronized with the flashes of fire in the video. Xingfu felt a sense of anxiety and frustration that he couldn't vent. It was as if something was stuck in his heart, and it was only growing stronger by the second. His dizziness grew stronger by the second, and the images of people running around and the flickering of the flames assaulted his optic nerves. Xingfu's breathing grew more and more ragged by the second. He felt as if he were trapped inside a box, and every breath he took would use up the limited amount of oxygen in his body. The alternating light and shadow in the video assaulted Xingfu's retina and stimulated his brain, disrupting his central nervous system and triggering a series of adverse reactions. To others, this might have been a spectacular and shocking battle. The beautiful video and the fact that it wasn't inferior to the battles of elites in real life was enough to excite any fan of the game. But to Xingfu, it was an unexpected killing tool. Sometimes, one didn't need a weapon to kill someone. A video was more than enough. The 2 bodyguards in front of the door were handpicked by the Queen, and the more they looked at the video, the more uneasy they felt. There's something wrong with the video. Turn it off, one of the bodyguards yelled. Unfortunately, it was already too late. Xingfu felt like he had reached his limit, but he still couldn't break free from that state. His legs finally gave out, and he collapsed to the ground. Chapter 330. 2 bodyguards rushed forward and caught Xingfu before his head hit the ground. Meanwhile, a group of paramedics who had been notified by the 2 bodyguards rushed to the door and started treating Xingfu. The paramedics were equipped with a full set of emergency medical equipment, and almost all of them were tailored to Xingfu's constitution. It was obvious that Xingfu had experienced a lot of sickness and pain throughout his life. While the paramedics were treating the unconscious Xingfu on the floor, Xingfu's bodyguards had surrounded Phineas and his bodyguards. Dozens of guns and other hidden weapons were aimed at Phineas and his bodyguards. Even Fenuzwa wasn't spared from their assault. Both Phineas and Fenuzwa were stunned by Xingfu's sudden turn of events. They never imagined that someone would suffer such a thing while watching a video of a game fight. Even if someone did, they had only heard about it from the grapevine. At the very least, they hadn't seen it themselves, so they didn't even think about it. Or rather, they didn't think that Xingfu's constitution would be this weak. Fenuzwa and the others didn't know Xingfu's genotype rank, and Fenuzwa had always thought that Xingfu was a rank E genotype at the very least. Among the peers he had interacted with, there was not a single person in this generation whose genes were below E rank. Even if there were, it would have been due to a genetic defect at birth that was modified by surgery. Xingfu's type was completely out of Fenuzwa's expectations. Xingfu's genotype wasn't even rank E. Most people with rank G genotype didn't live this long, so it had to be rank F genotype. Fenuzwa didn't expect the grandson of the great queen of Sector S to be a half-crippled rank F genotype. To Fenuzwa, anyone below rank E genotype was half-crippled. Xingfu's bodyguards couldn't hold back their killing intent and attacked Fenuzwa, Phineas, and Fenuzwa. Their bodyguards wouldn't be able to protect them if a fight broke out, not to mention that they were on Xingfu's starship right now. There was no way they could fight back. How did this happen? How did this happen? Fenuzwa, what's wrong with Xingfu? Phineas was now panicking. Just now, the bodyguard had already said that there was something wrong with the video, but he still couldn't believe it. After all, he had seen the video more than once, and no less than 5 people in his family had seen it, but none of them had any problems. So why did this happen the moment they arrived here? The paramedics had already set up a barrier around Xingfu, isolating him from everyone else. Phineas, Fenuzwa, and the bodyguards couldn't see what was happening inside. I really didn't mean to hurt him, it wasn't me. It really wasn't me. Right now, Phineas was terrified. If something were to happen to Xingfu, then his family would suffer a huge blow even if they didn't suffer a complete defeat. He didn't think that his family could withstand the wrath of Jean beginning and the star rank hunter behind him alone. Moreover, in this chaotic environment, everyone was cooperating with each other. Being able to rope in a good helper would also allow one to have a better foothold. The Andryra family behind Lung, the luxuries behind Fenuzwa, the golden beginning behind Bliss, and the star hunter behind Bliss were all powerful helpers. But now, someone was scheming to destroy their partnership. Who could it be? Even if Xingfu managed to get out of this dangerous situation alive, a crack had already been drawn in their relationship. Fenuzwa knew that Phineas couldn't calm down right now, and neither could anyone else. After all, the most important person in the room was still being treated. Someone must be trying to use you to sow discord between us and Xingfu. Fenuzwa's words were directed at Phineas, but it was also directed at the bodyguards who were ready to turn them into sieves with their guns. Fenuzwa didn't lower his voice at all, so everyone in the room heard him loud and clear. Of course I know. Do you think you'd still be alive and talking to me if you didn't? The person who spoke was one of the bodyguards who had been guarding the room just now. He was also the person who had been appointed by the Queen to protect Xingfu all this time, Du Hong. Right now, Du Hong was both regretting and blaming himself for not noticing that there was something wrong with the video. He thought that something was wrong with the game, but he didn't stop it right away. He thought that it was a problem with the game's settings, but he didn't expect something like this to happen. Fenuzwa grabbed Phineas by the collar and tried to calm him down. Phineas, think about it. Who gave you this video? Who edited it? And who are the players in the game? Phineas wasn't an idiot, so he did his best to calm himself down and think about who was the most suspicious person in the game. Young Master Fu isn't in a good state. He's in a very bad state. Du Hong's heart sank when he heard the words coming out of his communicator. Someone who was in a very bad state had to have a 70 to 80% chance of dying. Du Hong really wanted to vent his anger right now. He wanted to punch the wall, but they didn't dare to do anything too drastic because they were in a quarantine room. They were afraid that it would affect Xingfu's treatment. It was also why Du Hong hadn't ordered Phineas and Fan Yuzhua to move immediately. Du Hong glared hatefully at Fan Yuzhua and Phineas, his killing intent causing Fan Yuzhua to tremble uncontrollably. Fan Yuzhua's bodyguards hurriedly stepped forward to block Du Hong's line of sight. While Du Hong was panicking, one of his subordinates came over to report that Vanguard 11th Squad was requesting a call. "We don't have time," Du Hong growled. But the captain of the 11th Squad, Silan, said that he might have a way. The bodyguards stammered before quickly explaining what had happened. They had rejected Vanguard 11th Squad's communication request earlier, but they quickly discovered that one of their external communication devices had been hacked. Silan's first words after learning that something had happened to Xingfu was enough to stop them from cutting off the communication device. "He has a way." Du Hong frowned. He didn't trust Vanguard 11th Squad, but he immediately accepted the call and allowed Silan to come over when he heard that there was another patient in critical condition inside the quarantine room. Inside the 11th Squad's starship. "You've agreed?" Hui Mao turned to look at Silan as he pushed the debris to the side. "Yes. I'll head over right away." Silan paused for a moment before turning to look at Hui Mao, who was staring at him pitifully. "Put away your wings if you want to go." Whoosh! Weeze's fully spread wings instantly shrank into nothingness. "Should we continue monitoring the other two starships?" Moon asked Silan. "Of course. Make sure not to leave any traces." "Got it." Silan had told Moon to keep an eye on Xingfu's condition from the very beginning. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been notified as soon as Xingfu was in trouble. Although he couldn't directly monitor Xingfu's condition, he was able to deduce what had happened based on the movements in other parts of the starship that weren't heavily guarded. Only Xingfu's condition would cause everyone on the starship to panic. Silan learned from Du Hong that Xingfu had fainted. Silan knew a thing or two about hypnosis, and from Du Hong's words, Silan was able to deduce that the recording was a very powerful hypnosis. "How is he now?" Silan asked Du Hong after arriving at the room. "Very bad. Tell me what you need to do." Silan shook his head. "I want to check on him first." "Impossible." Du Hong refused. No one was allowed to enter Xingfu's room while he was undergoing emergency treatment, not even Du Hong. The Queen had specifically sent the paramedics to him, and they were under her direct command. Du Hong didn't have the authority to order them around, or else Xingfu wouldn't have been forced to drink a cup of warm tea without resistance. It was because the paramedics were always watching him. Hui Mao crouched on Silan's shoulder. The first thing he did when he arrived was look around the room. His gaze landed on a square table with some pastries and snacks on it. This was a place for entertainment, after all, and the pastries were for the people who came to the room. Seeing that Silan was going to talk to Du Hong, Hui Mao jumped down from Silan's shoulder and made a beeline for the table. Xingfu's bodyguards had been paying close attention to Silan the moment he walked into the room. They were on high alert. That was why everyone split their attention to keep an eye on Hui Mao the moment he jumped down from Silan's shoulder. What made people dumbfounded was that under the watchful eyes of so many people, in such a tense atmosphere, this guy could actually jump onto the square platform and eat as if nothing had happened. Du Hong pretended not to notice the fat cat's actions and continued chatting with Silan. Less than a minute later, however, another piece of news came out of the quarantine room. Du Hong's face paled, and Silan circled around Du Hong and headed for the quarantine room. This time, Du Hong didn't stop him. Du Hong contacted the people inside the quarantine room. "Uncle Zhua, let him in. We can't let young Master Fu turn into a vegetable." One of the walls of the quarantine room opened up for Silan to enter. Du Hong followed him inside, while Hui Mao continued to eat on the table. Xingfu's medical team was very capable. If they hadn't treated him in time, he would have died a long time ago. It wasn't easy to keep Xingfu alive in such a state. Xingfu's condition wasn't looking good. His heart rate was erratic, sometimes as if he was in a hurry, sometimes as if he was taking a stroll. Moreover, his brain waves were very strange. Xingfu was still in a hypnotic state, and he seemed to be completely isolated from the outside world. No sound or movement could affect him, so he had to rely on himself to break free from the hypnosis. It was a very powerful hypnosis technique. What is that kid trying to do? Zhuoxing, the person in charge of the medical team, was a middle-aged man. He was also Xingfu's doctor since he was born, and he was sent by the queen to watch over Xingfu. After checking Xingfu's condition, Silan looked around the 15-square-meter quarantine room and said to Zhuoxing and Du Hong, "I want everyone to leave except you two." There were 4 other members of the medical team in the quarantine room, and they looked at Zhuoxing after hearing Silan's words. Zhuoxing nodded at them, and they left. Silan made some adjustments to the equipment connected to Xingfu's body. Zhuoxing was just about to yell at him when Silan took out a small bottle filled with a green liquid. As soon as he saw this small bottle, Zhuoxing's words of reprimand disappeared without a trace. His face was filled with shock and disbelief. Chapter 331. Genya had given Silan the vial, and it contained a natural plant hormone extracted from the Fuji tree. Since this was the first time he was using it on Xingfu, Silan cut the dosage in half. After injecting the green liquid into Xingfu's body, Silan paid close attention to the various physiological indicators displayed on the device. Zhuoxing and Du Hong were dumbfounded by what they saw, and the other didn't know how to react. What shocked Zhuoxing the most was the pattern on the vial Silan had just taken out. He had seen that pattern before in the Queen's residence. The Queen treated anything with that pattern with great importance and forbade anyone from touching it. Zhuoxing knew that the pattern was left behind by the Queen's husband, Xingfu's grandfather. Zhuoxing had always thought that Xingfu's grandfather was no longer alive, and that he wasn't anyone special. He had never heard of any great power or famous person in the League of Stars with the surname Zhen. But now, Silan had taken out something with that pattern on it. Du Hong noticed that Zhuoxing was still in a daze, and he didn't stop Silan from messing around either. So, Du Hong poked Zhuoxing with a finger. Zhuoxing finally snapped out of his daze, but he didn't answer Du Hong's anxious gaze. He simply shook his head and motioned for Du Hong not to disturb him. Du Hong couldn't understand why Zhuoxing, who had always been cautious and wouldn't easily allow others to interfere in his treatment, would allow Silan to run amok. Moreover, the thing that puzzled Du Hong the most was Zhuoxing's reaction just now. Du Hong had never seen Zhuoxing reveal such a shocked expression before. Perhaps it was because he was a doctor, but Zhuoxing had always been calm and collected. But when Silan took out that small bottle, he nearly lost his composure completely. Zhuoxing must know something he didn't. Just what kind of secret relationship did the Vanguard B Squadron commander, Silan, have with Golden Beginning? Before Zhuoxing and Du Hong could think too much into it, the device connected to Xingfu's body showed a huge change in the patient's condition. Both Zhuoxing and Du Hong's eyes widened when they saw one of the numbers on the device. The device showed that Xingfu's gene rank had changed from F to E, and it was even showing signs of evolving towards D. However, the evolution wasn't stable at all. The numbers were changing beyond the safe range. It wasn't a good sign. Normally, this phenomenon meant that there was a 60% chance that the evolution would fail for those who had been injected with genetic evolution medicine. The higher the number exceeded the safe range, the lower the success rate. Was Silan planning to upgrade Xingfu's gene rank before the treatment? Both Zhuoxing and Du Hong were thinking the same thing, but if something like this were to happen after the injection, then they had to stop the evolution process. The problem was that Silan had no intention of stopping it right now. Xingfu's body started spasming and his expression twisted. No one knew what he was thinking about that would trigger such a violent reaction. It was a tyrannical and almost irreversible hypnosis. This kind of hypnosis was very difficult to deal with. Xingfu might be able to deal with it if it were someone else, but not him. His body wouldn't be able to withstand the restorative treatment, and most of the drugs were highly resistant to it. It didn't matter how many factions were involved in this, one thing was for sure, the mastermind really wanted Xingfu's life. Du Hong had said that he would have to undergo forced treatment to save Xingfu's life, but it was very likely that the hypnotized Xingfu would turn him into an idiot. However, Silan believed that there was a high chance that Xingfu's brain would die even if he underwent forced treatment. Silan made some adjustments to the device connected to Xingfu's head. The device would generate bioelectricity to stimulate Xingfu's brain. Although the numbers displayed on the device seemed to be outside the safe range, they didn't reach the baseline of a life-threatening situation. However, Zhuoxing needed to consider the hypnosis technique. Regarding hypnosis, Zhuoxing didn't know much about it. That was why he couldn't make a proper analysis. Right now, Xingfu looked like a man who was having a nightmare. His face was filled with anxiety, fear, and even anger and disgust. Suddenly, Xingfu said something that sounded like he was talking in his sleep. However, neither Zhuoxing nor Du Hong understood what he was saying. They couldn't tell if he was speaking in a different language because of the illness. Silan understood. Xingfu said it in the imperial language of the Mist Bodhisattva Empire. What Xingfu said was, "I don't have a grandfather." Silan knew that Xingfu held a deep grudge against the queen. However, he didn't expect Zhenya to be the one Xingfu hated the most. It was because of Zhenya that Xingfu's genes were stuck at a level that could only be described as half-crippled. Moreover, the queen didn't allow them to undergo surgery to modify their genes, so they had no choice but to drag their bodies along until now. Silan had a feeling that Xingfu hated Zhenya. Otherwise, why would he say, "I don't have a grandfather," when he was hypnotized? He didn't know how Zhenya would react to that. The fact that Xingfu was able to say such a thing meant that he had broken through the absolute seal of the hypnosis. It was a benefit of his gene's evolution. "You hate him. Do you hate your grandfather?" Silan asked in the Mist Bodhisattva language. Zhuoxing and Du Hong stared at Silan without blinking. "Is he communicating with me?" Xingfu didn't respond to Silan's question, but his reaction was intense. It meant that Xingfu had not only broken through the absolute seal of the hypnosis, but also developed an external consciousness. "Do you hate him because he left you and your father with inferior genes?" Silan's voice turned slow and deep. He spoke at the perfect pitch so that Xingfu, who had developed an external consciousness, could hear him clearly without causing a negative reaction. "He didn't leave you with shackles. Your genes aren't inferior, they're not a burden, and they're not trash. They're just things that most people can't even dream of. It's just that they're sleeping right now, so you can't see what they're capable of. You've only experienced the pain of your genes for 20 years, but he's experienced it for decades. He's gone from the prime of his youth until his hair has turned white. His face is covered in wrinkles when his partner still looks young. Maybe that's why he chose to leave you and find a place to grow old in peace. He didn't want you to feel sad for him. I know that he regretted his decision later on. It's because he likes to draw 3 people, a couple, a child, and a couple. Then, he would draw many more children behind the child, but none of them had faces. I once asked him why the children didn't draw their faces. He told me that he wanted to draw them, but he couldn't. Later on, he returned home, but he wasn't as happy as he looked. He liked to wake up early, eat breakfast, stretch out a little, and then lie down on the wooden rocking chair under the Fuji tree to stare blankly at the artificial sea. Sometimes, he would close his eyes and think about the people he couldn't let go of. It was a feeling of loss. Don't blame him. If he could, he'd like to be with you. Everyone thought he liked peace and quiet, but that wasn't the case. He wanted to be surrounded by his children and grandchildren. He wanted to watch them grow up, but he had his own difficulties. His siblings' children often visited him, but he always sat in a daze for a long time after each visit. He would sit alone on the rocking chair and stare at the sky through the leaves of the Fuji tree, enjoying the gentle breeze that carried away his melancholy. Maybe he's afraid now, too. If you don't believe me, you can ask him in person. I'm sure you'll meet him soon enough. Maybe one day, he'll come for you with a huge fleet of starships. Every starship is bigger and more beautiful than this one. They'll even have a private army dressed in neat uniforms. They'll even have that leaf symbol you recognize on them. It was like a cool breeze on a hot, stifling summer afternoon. It blew away the irritating heat, but it didn't feel abrupt or violent at all. Xingfu's irritation and negative emotions gradually calmed down as Silen spoke. Zhuoxing knew that Silen's hypnotic voice wasn't the only thing that calmed Xingfu. It was the content of Silen's words that Silen calmed him down. Every son and grandchild of the queen had a personal physician, and Zhuoxing had been with Xingfu ever since he was born. That was why Zhuoxing knew a little of the language Xingfu was speaking, but he didn't understand it well enough to understand what they were saying. He didn't expect Silen to know about it. Zhuoxing and Du Hong really wanted to know what Silen was talking to Xingfu about. How in the world did he manage to calm Xingfu down and speak in such a strange language? What in the world was he talking about? Both Zhuoxing and Du Hong were conflicted. This young man was like a mystery. You thought you knew him well, but he could overturn your assumptions the very next moment. Zhuoxing and Du Hong's jaws nearly dropped to the floor when they saw Xingfu's childish smile. When they saw the gene rank on the machine, they felt like they were about to faint. On the instrument, the letter that was fluctuating unstably from E to had turned into B at some point in time. But at this time, Silen had stopped the subsequent evolution of his genes. Silen's words had a hypnotic effect. It was a process that would guide Xingfu's consciousness and help him recover from the extreme state he was in. Combined with the medicine he injected, Xingfu's genes evolved smoothly. Silen knew that the Zhen family's genes were special. They needed to stimulate their genes twice. If they only received the first injection and did not receive the second stimulation, their gene level would deteriorate and get worse. Only after the second injection would they be able to stabilize their genes. That was why every member of the Zhen family who had undergone 2 genetic evolutions had genes equivalent to a rank in the League of Stars, or even higher. Aside from the Fuji tree extract, the other genetic evolutions used by the League of Stars were actually harmful to the Zhen family's genes. This was probably why the queen didn't allow them to undergo genetic surgery. The evolution of Xingfu's genes had increased his resistance by a lot, and it was far superior to his rank F genes. Therefore, it didn't take long for Xingfu to wake up after his genes stabilized at rank B and Silen stopped the evolution process. Du Hong wanted nothing more than to stick his head close to the machine and look at the data. After Xingfu woke up, he ignored Zhuoxing and Du Hong. Instead, he stared at Silen for a long time before he finally asked, "You're not my long-lost brother from the same father but from different mothers, are you?" Silen. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.